Chapter 3:26. The owner of the boat, who was originally just forcing a smile upon hearing this, the smile on her face became much more sincere. What Gong Gong said is right. Making Wang Ye happy is the most important task. In this way, the one to suffer would not be her family alone. With a group of people accompanying her, they would not be able to scheme against the pavilion. On the contrary, she might be able to scheme from within. In the end, even if she lost this lead, she might not necessarily suffer a loss. Nu Jia is so bold. Can you give Nu Jia full authority to handle this matter? Naturally, the owner of the boat is more familiar with all aspects. We people naturally need to be by master's side at all times to serve. Mu Gonggong expressed that he could clearly see the other party's thoughts. However, this had nothing to do with him. What he needed was only the result. As long as the matter could be handled beautifully, this was only a small matter, and there was no need to take it to heart. There is one thing to remind the owner of the boat. Master likes cleanliness in all aspects. Foul air and so on absolutely cannot exist. Master's actions are entirely based on his mood. He might just purely listen to the music and enjoy the dance. Therefore, it is best not to do unnecessary things. Nu Jia understands. In terms of handling matters based on one's mood, there was probably no one more powerful than them. Naturally, they did not dare to be rash. Mu Gonggong nodded and got up to leave. The owner of the boat naturally hurriedly got up to send him off. When Mu Gonggong's figure could no longer be seen, she slowly got up. With an unfathomable expression, she stood in the same place for a moment. Someone come. A young servant girl came in and respectfully greeted, "Owner, return to the pavilion." Jean Wang Ye would be coming tomorrow. If it was only her pavilion and pleasure boat, it would be fine. In any case, they were doing business every day. At worst, they would just clear the place, and everything else would be the same. But now, they had to unite 10 houses. No, it should be 12 houses. The 12 most competitive houses. There was no reason to exclude the last 2 houses. If there were benefits, everyone should reap it together. Speaking of which, the famous brothels of Chuanzhou all had their own pleasure boats. On the contrary, the famous pleasure boats also had their own brothels. The two were inseparable. As for which side was the main one, each house had their own characteristics. Of course, if one of these two was missing, then it would not be up to standard. Although each family had their own program, they couldn't completely go their own way. That way, they would appear scattered, and sometimes they wouldn't be able to support the scene. Although the owner of the pleasure boat wanted to scheme against the other opponents, she couldn't mess it up because she was responsible for taking the lead. If something happened and Jean Qinhuang blamed her, her pleasure boat would be the first to bear the brunt. Injuring the enemy 800 and losing 1,000. No one would do this kind of stupid thing. Before he was even halfway back, someone had already come knocking on his door aggressively. Thinking about it, it made sense. He had spent more than 10,000 silver taels to book the pleasure boat, and it had only been half a day. In the end, he didn't even see the shadow of the boat. If he was alone, it would have been fine, but he had brought along a few good friends. Being stood up was a small matter, but losing face was a big matter. How could he not be furious? The owner of the pleasure boat rubbed her temples. She didn't want to pay attention to it, but in line with the principle that harmony breeds wealth, this was also a good opportunity to release tomorrow's matter. Although this was far from enough, some things had to be done step by step. He asked someone to bring them in and appease them nicely. Then, he slowly explained to them the reason why they were here. The person who was unable to restrain his anger upon hearing Jean Qinhuang's name, his anger was immediately extinguished. Now, the entire Sichuan Zhoufu's officials were pinched in the hands of this master like dough. Usually, those arrogant and despotic official hedonistic sons, if the family's control was a bit lax, they could still stroll outside, but they absolutely didn't dare to be rash. And most of them hadn't shown their faces for half a month. They were merely rich people and had a natural reverence for the imperial family. Jean Qinhuang has booked the pleasure boat. Although it can only be used tomorrow, according to reason, Gongzi booked it today. Nu Jia should let the girls play the zither and sing songs to accompany Gongzi to play. It's just that Jin Qinhuang did not book only Lucia's house. Lucia must coordinate with the other 11 houses. It involves not only the allocation of the pleasure boat, but also the arrangement of the girls. Because the matter was so sudden, Nujia was also somewhat flustered before and momentarily forgot about Gongzi's booking of the boat. Please forgive me. There are more than 10 pleasure boats under Lucia's name. Actually, we can allocate another one for Gongzi. But compared to this main pleasure boat, Gongzi might not be satisfied. How about waiting for 2 days? At that time, we will give Gongzi a 20% discount. What does Gongzi think? Since the words had already been said, naturally, he wouldn't continue to be unforgiving. Moreover, the other party was Jin Qinhuang. Even if he didn't book the boat, it wasn't that he didn't have any face. Moreover, thinking about it, to book 12 houses at the same time, such a thing had never happened before. Just based on this, other people had to stand aside. Boat owner is too polite. The matter was resolved, and the boat owner politely sent them off. Time was pressing, and they couldn't continue to delay. Since Jin Qinhuang has booked the pleasure boat, then Miss Daybreak, another person in the same group, spoke up. The people beside him also nodded in agreement. Although they didn't want to think about it, but watching the excitement wasn't bad either. Looking at the current situation, they were afraid that the boat owner naturally understood his meaning. Tomorrow's ceremony will naturally be cancelled. As for the rest, nothing is known. Naturally, no one dared to make up something that wasn't certain. Especially with the other party's status. If they weren't careful, the other party's one finger could crush them until not even ashes were left. After the guests left, the curtain at the back was pulled open. A beautiful woman leisurely walked over. If one looked carefully, there was a bit of eagerness. "Mei Yi, is what you said just now true?" Her voice carried an uncontrollable excitement. The boat owner lifted her eyelids and glanced at her. What the other party was thinking, she was very clear. When this matter was known by all the girls, there would definitely be many who would be tempted. The woman saw that Mei Yi didn't answer her and knew that she seemed to have gone overboard. But after thinking about it, she knew that this kind of thing couldn't be faked. The boat owner, Mei Yi, returned to the pavilion boat. The location was the veritable red light district of Chuanzhoufu. The entire area, the location of several streets, to a certain extent, could definitely be considered a city that never sleeps. According to the normal situation, the girls in the pavilion would get up one after another at this time. Of course, a few people's work and rest schedule was the same as ordinary people, such as the top hostess Daybreak. The ceremony was imminent. As long as it was a normal person, their mood would definitely not be good. Daybreak was the same. Although she didn't show any expression on her face, she hadn't performed on stage for 3 days. This was the best explanation. However, Mei Yi wasn't angry. As long as the girls under her were obedient, she had always been more tolerant. Mei Yi returned to her residence first and quickly wrote 11 invitations. She had people send them out immediately and ensure that they were delivered to the owner. After thinking about it, she went to Daybreak's bedroom. As the top hostess's bedroom, the layout naturally wasn't small. There were 2 rooms inside and outside. The furnishings were exquisite and quite extraordinary. Those who didn't know would think that it was the bedroom of some noble lady. Under normal circumstances, this was the time for her afternoon nap. But now, she probably couldn't sleep. She was seriously playing the pipa in her hands. Who was Mei Yi? She had also walked out of this step. She was also a talented and beautiful woman. Many of the girls under her had been personally taught by her. How could she not hear that Daybreak was absent-minded? Her fingers were only mechanically plucking the strings because she was familiar with them. There wasn't the slightest bit of emotion. "If you don't want to play, then don't play," Mei Yi said neither lightly nor heavily. Daybreak's fingers stopped plucking. She put down the pipa and came back to her senses. Mei Yi sat down at the table. The servant girl at the side quickly poured a cup of tea. Mei Yi didn't look at Daybreak. Auntie Mei didn't look at the teacup. She just stared at Daybreak with a seriousness she had never shown before. This was the most special girl under her. Although she wasn't from a rich family, she still lived a rich life. However, her luck was bad and her fate was rough. When she was under her, she was only 12 years old. Although she wore rough clothes, she already showed the beauty of a budding beauty. Because of her foundation and careful training, she blossomed with a brilliant youth. She was quiet and reserved. No matter what was taught, she would learn and not resist. However, even when she was learning how to serve men, she didn't have a vulgar aura. Before the age of 15, she basically didn't let her show her face. After the age of 15, she tried her best to delay her marriage. However, in the end, she was in this line of work. It was impossible for her to never get married. Moreover, as her fame grew, whether she got married or not was no longer up to her as the owner. After a while, she said, "Tomorrow's marriage ceremony is canceled." This was originally a happy news. However, Daybreak's eyes only moved slightly before returning to calmness. "Are you unhappy? It's just that tomorrow is canceled. It's not like it's canceled forever. A day earlier or a day later, isn't the result the same? Not necessarily. Jean Qinhuang has booked the pleasure boat for tomorrow. If Jean Qinhuang takes a fancy to you and wants to take you away, even if he doesn't give it to me, I can't do anything." Daybreak understood what she meant. In fact, compared to many brothels, Aunt May was already considered to be very humane. She said this. It seemed like she was giving herself a reason to let go, but it was also a sign of her soft heart. Although there were some contradictions at certain times, she hoped that Daybreak could be good, but her emotions would prevail. Even so, Daybreak's face still didn't have any emotions. She picked up the pipa again and fiddled with it. "To me, it's naturally good. However, the one who will be hurt is Jean Qinhuang Fei, a woman whose fate is always manipulated by men. How innocent. You've already fallen to this point and you're still thinking about others. Daybreak, how many years has it been? You're still like this. It's probably because I've been too good to you. If I let you suffer, let you taste the taste of being ridden by 1,000 people, and also encounter those special hobbies of abuse, you probably won't be so naive. At that time, if you encounter a good opportunity, maybe you'll nibble on the so-called first wife and also want to climb up," Mei Yi said sarcastically. But what she was thinking in her heart, only she knew. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653798. HTML chapter error. Click here to report registration free. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com Mobile Edition Reading Website. Bicken.com. Chapter 327. Even if Daybreak said so, Mei Yi was still prepared to open the door for Daybreak. Moreover, from her position, she was fully responsible for this matter. It was completely justifiable for her to give the girls under her command a better opportunity. Even if others were jealous that she was using her power for personal gain, they would feel that it was a matter of course. Putting aside this matter, to a certain extent, between Mei Yi and Daybreak, there really was a mother-daughter relationship. The two people casually chatted about trivial matters until a servant came to report that the people invited by the owner of the boat had arrived. Mei Yi then got up and left. After Mei Yi left, Daybreak was somewhat lost in thought. It was unknown if she was thinking of something or if she was simply lost in thought. Mei Yi held a round fan in her hand to cover half of her face. Because it was summer, at least 9 out of 10 of them were relatively cool. In front of Daybreak, Aunt May still had the appearance of an elder. But now, she had the aura and smile that a group of people should have. Even if she wasn't meeting a benefactor, when facing these old rivals, she still had to bring out her full grandeur. She gracefully appeared and greeted them with a smile. The girls under her command competed in beauty, and they were naturally no exception. Don't look at how they were already middle-aged Sun Yang in terms of age. Basically, they all walked the same path. If they occasionally met someone with a special taste and they were willing, it wasn't a rare thing for them to receive guests at this age. I probably don't need to say the reason for inviting you all. In order to prevent these people from dragging their feet, it was clearly written on the invitation. With such a big banner, these people would be able to slip away quickly. Even though she won this time by borrowing the name of Jin Qinhuang, she didn't feel that it was wrong at all and deliberately revealed the smile of a victor. 11 people gritted their teeth at her, but there was no other way. Who told them to not hold the title of number one? For people who didn't understand the situation of Sichuan Zhoufu, if they had enough money, their first choice would definitely be the best. This so-called best was naturally the one with the title of number one. Mei Yi enough. Enough, Mei Yang. Who doesn't know each other? If you have something to say, just say it. Don't keep us in suspense. We all know what it means to be a prince. No matter what he wants, we just have to serve him well. If he's happy, it's naturally good for everyone. If he's unhappy, it's naturally bad for everyone. Some people couldn't stand her smug look. Mei Yang sat down. If that's the case, then I'll be frank. Auntie Mei told Eunuch Mu's wishes one by one. Of course, it wasn't just the original words. The effect was at least 12 times exaggerated. Moreover, her words allowed the pavilion boat to have absolute control. That's basically it. Everyone knew that there was an element of exaggeration in this, but they didn't know how much of an exaggeration it was. Therefore, even if they were indignant, they didn't know where to start. Since Mei Yang is the one making the decision, then what are the rules? Mei Yang, just tell us directly and we'll listen. If there was nothing to say, then he would just let it go. There was no problem and there was no need to fuss about it. However, it was absolutely impossible to trample on them too harshly. What do you all think about using the Myriad Flower Terrace and the 100-boat ferry? It was clear that Mei Yang already had a plan in mind. Everyone was silent for a moment. 100-boat ferry? Our generation has only heard of it. We've always fought with each other openly and covertly. Even during festivals like the Lantern Festival and the Mid-Autumn Festival, we've never cooperated on the 100-boat ferry. This time, we'll use pleasing Jin Qinhuang to take a look ourselves. The others didn't say anything, but they obviously agreed with this idea. Whether it was the Myriad Flower Terrace or the 100-boat ferry, there were rules to follow. The main problem was the details. Let's not talk about other things. The top courtesans of each family must be the main characters. It's just that if they're together, how can they be separated? If they're together, how should they be together? And if they're separated, how should they be separated? After roughly agreeing on the rules, it was time to act on the specifics. The first thing was naturally to call back the people from each family's pleasure boats as fast as possible. Because they didn't know how long Jin Qinhuang's patience and interest could be maintained, they had to prepare all aspects as much as possible. There had to be enough programs. The girls from each building and boat were basically all within the predetermined range. Every day, there would be pleasure boats on Linchuan River. When there were fewer, there might be a boat 100 zhang apart. When there were more, there would be a boat at the head and tail of the boat. But today, it was a little strange. It seemed like it had been more than 2 shurchen, yet not a single boat was seen. What kind of situation was this? Did all the rich and powerful people have a change of character at the same time? Of course, this was the thought of those who didn't know the situation. Those who knew were like the guests who were driven off the pleasure boats. Faced with the various buildings and boats, they kindly apologized and even returned a lot of silver taels. Adding on the fact that they knew the whole story, they could only pinch their noses and admit it. They were somewhat angry, but didn't dare to speak out. And the cancellation of the wedding ceremony of the top courtesan of the pavilion boat, Miss Daybreak, naturally spread more and more. Some people felt that it didn't matter. Naturally, there were also people who were extremely resentful. For example, those who were determined to get Daybreak. Among them, there might be people who only fancied Daybreak's appearance. Naturally, there were also people who were deeply in love with her. After all, There weren't many young masters who fancied the women of the brothels and brothels, but from time to time, there would be a few. Daybreak just so happened to meet such a person, and it was the young master of the Guan family. His family had originally been messed around by Jin Qinhuang. Now even the woman he liked was going to be taken for himself by the other party. The hatred in his heart was practically about to condense into a substance, but unfortunately, he couldn't do anything about it. Thus, the hatred also included himself, a burning pain. That's right, in these people's view, Daybreak was definitely in Jin Qinhuang's bag. Of course, there was also this kind of group of people. For example, in a certain dark room, this Jin Qinhuang is really as extravagant as the rumors say. Moreover, he's a classic example of only the magistrate is allowed to set the fire, but the common people are not allowed to light the lamp. He even wants that kind of insatiable Wang Fei. What Qinhuang? He's just a lowly peasant who stole the Huan family's country. A rotten loach is a rotten loach. After sitting on the throne for a few years, he became a true dragon? Dream on. The others didn't comment on his words. At this time, their mouths were cursing nimbly. Once they got out of ear, they dared to make a sound. And as for how the Li Imperial clan was, they were well aware. Let's not talk about other things. This is a rare opportunity. If a turtle hides and doesn't go out, we can't get close even if we want to. Now that he's taken the initiative to come out, there's no reason to let him go. Do I need you to say this? I've been waiting for this day. A dissolute and lecherous man, coming to a place like Chuanzhou. How could he not come out? https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653799. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Com Mobile Edition Reading Website, mbicken.com. Chapter 328. When the preparations were almost done, Auntie May sent someone to the other courtyard where Li Hongyuan and the others were currently staying. She wanted to inquire about when Jin Qinhuang was going out. Although the 100-boat ferry was fine regardless of whether it was day or night, but at night, with various kinds of lanterns, the mood would be better. Many people liked the mood. Super fast and stable updates. However, Auntie May did not have much hope of knowing Jin Qinhuang's schedule. She was just trying her luck. If she could know, it would be better. If she could not, she would just make more preparations. Speaking of which, Li Hongyuan's guards were not few in number, but those who knew about his private affairs were still few. After all, even if they were trusted by him, it was impossible for all of them to be nearby guards. On the other hand, the closer they were, the more they would know. However, there were only a few people who knew that it was actually Jingwan who went to the pleasure boat to listen to music and enjoy the dance. Therefore, when the guards at the door knew the purpose of the visitors, they were a little stunned. Wang Ye had deep feelings for Wang Fei. This was absolute. Previously, no matter if it was Kaiming Prefecture City or Chongzhou Prefecture City, whenever Wang Ye went out, he would bring Wang Fei with him. Places like brothels, he would not even touch the corner of the street. Now, Wang Ye let people book the pleasure boat? They were used to Wang Ye's attitude towards Wang Fei. How could they not be stunned when he suddenly did this? However, even if they thought until their brains broke, they would not know that this was actually Jingwan's wish. However, this kind of thing, it was obvious that people outside would not dare to casually joke about it. Using this kind of joke to come to the door, was it not courting death? The problem now was, should they chase them away? If they chased them away, they were not qualified to decide Wang Ye's matters. If they did not dare to leave, if they went in to ask, it might alarm Wang Fei. It did not seem right. In the end, they decided to go and ask. Anyway, they could not face Wang Ye directly. One of them went in, and the one who came out to meet him was naturally Mu, and Mu nodded. Wait a moment. Wang Fei usually had a plan when doing things. Even when going out, it was the same. She was not like Master, who did not care about ordinary small things and acted as she pleased. As soon as Jingwan heard Eunuch Mu's words, she guessed that it was probably not as simple as a gaily painting pleasure boat. It was likely that a lot of people were involved. However, whether it was Mu or the owner of the gaily painting pleasure boat who had a hand in it, there was no need to investigate now. To some extent, it was more appropriate to make it known now than to keep a low profile. Muin, go and see what kind of preparations they've made. If necessary, we can cooperate with them to prevent them from brushing away our good intentions. Yes. As for Jin Qinhuang's opinion? What was that? All right, it's not that exaggerated. However, if Muin were to ask again, he might not get anything good out of it, and might even incur his master's dissatisfaction. The result would be the same anyway, so why bother to ask again? It took Muin almost half an hour to go back and forth, and the news he brought back was considerable. More than 4 hours? That was the time it took for a large-scale party in her previous life. Of course, it's best to make it perfect. Let them arrange it according to the most suitable time. Just inform me when the time comes. Aunt may send someone to follow Eunuch Mu back. In this way, Eunuch Mu did not have to go again. As for the upcoming 100-boat crossing, Jingwan was looking forward to it, but she didn't seem to be in a rush. After all, with her experience in her previous life, she had seen wonderful things that she hadn't seen before. Regardless of whether it was gorgeous or profound, those directors were all talented. She just didn't know how good the director's ability was in pure ancient style. When it was time to do something, she would do it. After waking up from her afternoon nap, she took some time to wake up. Then, Jingwan's clothes for going out were sent over. It was a set of men's clothes. Jingwan raised her eyebrows. Looking at the craftsmanship, she knew that it was made by her own maid. Obviously, it was not possible to have it before, but there was no trace of it being made in a hurry. Either it was changed from someone's clothes, or it was originally prepared for someone. It had already been embroidered and only needed to be cut and sewn. It doesn't seem strange for a dignified Wangya to bring a maid to the pleasure boat. Although it was a bit strange to bring a woman to that kind of place, but some people were so willful that you could not do anything about it. Jin Qinhuang's style should be considered outstanding. Didn't they all say that Ben Wang likes both men and women? Instead of bringing a maid, Ben Wang is more willing to bring a handsome young master. Li Hongyuan was half leaning and half leaning, looking at Jingwan with a bit of charm. Jingwan clearly felt Li Hongyuan's exuberant interest. It seemed that this was a very interesting matter to him, and it seemed to be more important than anything else. This man was almost obedient to her in every way. So, this little interest, how could he not respond? Jingwan went to the inner room to change her clothes, tied up her hair, and also brought a folding fan. Then, with one hand behind her back, Jingwan lightly fanned herself as she walked out with a perfect smile. What a romantic young man, but his gaze should not fall on her chest. Li Hongyuan narrowed his eyes and sized her up. In the end, his gaze still fell on that position. Thus, his smile became more obvious. Turning back to before we got married, when one could still reluctantly pretend to be a young master, but now Jingwan closed the folding fan in her hand and casually threw it over. Li Hongyuan stretched out his hand and caught it. With a snap, he opened it. That was the true boundless romance. Jingwan was well aware of her own body. In the past few months, she had grown faster than she had expected, be it in terms of height or other areas. In fact, her puberty was considered to be late in comparison. At certain times, intercourse could indeed promote puberty. After this period of time, even if she wanted to grow, she probably wouldn't be able to grow much. Who is to blame? Jingwan glared at him. Blame me? Blame me. Although Li Hongyuan did not know the relationship between puberty and external factors, but this kind of thing, even if the responsibility was not on him, it was on him. He was even somewhat complacent. How could Jingwan not know that she was being teased again? She was too lazy to continue, otherwise, in the end, the one who lost would still be herself. What's the difference between this and women's clothing? Naturally, you can't fool people at close range. But from afar, it's not a problem to fool them. Using the folding fan to cover up appropriately. Li Hongyuan gestured to his body. By tomorrow, the news of this prince having Nenfeng will spread throughout Chuanzhou Institute. What's the meaning of this? Jing Wan was a little puzzled. I want to see if the level of someone's shamelessness will increase by a little. Jing Wan nodded. Yuan, just say that you want to find an idea. It's not that complicated. To put it bluntly, a certain someone's bad temper is acting up again. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653803. HTML. Please click here to report. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com Mobile Edition Reading Website, mbicken.com. Chapter 329. Jingwan followed Li Hongyuan out the door before she remembered whether or not she should bring a maid. Just let He, Mei, and Baishao follow. Li Hongyuan directly selected people. Li Hongyuan naturally wouldn't let them fall behind in terms of martial arts. On the contrary, he even stepped up their training. When Jingwan didn't know, they didn't fall behind every day. Originally, He Mei and Baishao didn't know who the person who was supposed to be teaching and training them was. Now they basically knew. However, no one exposed it and didn't mention it to Jingwan. To some extent, this was a matter between Wang Fei and Wang Ye. Men's clothing? A maid should be the same as her master. No need, it won't affect them. In fact, if you follow the arrangement on the pleasure boat, it doesn't matter if you follow openly. Jingwan lightly rolled her eyes. Was it interesting to talk about this now? If he didn't intend for her to wear men's clothing from the beginning, he wouldn't have taken it out. Moreover, he clearly knew that she would never refuse such a small matter. This man was really, from the beginning, he harbored evil intentions, and had her firmly in his grasp. Li Hongyuan chuckled and scratched the tip of Jingwan's nose, then naturally kissed it. When the guards, including Yu Zhongqing, Li Suyan, and the others, saw Jingwan in men's clothing for the first time, their first reaction was to wonder when Jin Qinhuang had a little gongzi that he was so close to. The next moment, they discovered that it was Qin Fei and hurriedly moved their line of sight away, not daring to look anymore. As for the reason why Qin Fei was dressed like this, no one went back to investigate. When Li Hongyuan went out, if it wasn't for Jingwan's request, he was basically a master who wouldn't hide his whereabouts. Today, he had some purpose, so naturally, he wouldn't hide it. There weren't many guards by his side, a total of more than 20, and there were also a few female guards. Were all the guards just like this? Of course not. Li Hongyuan knew very well that Jiangnan was the nest of the remnants of the previous dynasty. He didn't know the exact number of people, but it definitely wouldn't be a small number. This group of people was dedicated to finding trouble for the Li royal family. Assassination was a normal thing. In today's situation, it would be strange if they didn't make a move. With Wan by his side, he would naturally make proper arrangements just in case. When they arrived at the Linchuan River, they saw a 2-story pleasure boat that looked much larger than ordinary pleasure boats. The curtains hanging around the lower level had all been dismantled, and the interior was exquisitely decorated. The upper level was like a house, but there was no roof in the middle. It was like a walkway connecting the two sides. It was relatively narrower, and there was a wider space on the outside. Of the houses on both sides, the left side was shorter, while the right side, in Jingwan's eyes, was either a small 3-story or a fake one. The roof was also carved and decorated with colored glaze. It could be seen that a lot of thought had gone into this pleasure boat alone. Of course, the real beauty wasn't the pleasure boat, but the people on the pleasure boat. Because of their arrival, a group of beauties came out of the pleasure boat in a line. With Auntie Mei in the lead, there were 2 rows of 12 people behind her. They could be said to be national beauties, each with their own unique characteristics. They were fat and thin, and behind them was a group of maidservants who looked younger. Looking at their beauty, in a year or two, they would probably become a veritable cash cow again. Not to mention other things, just this scene alone was definitely a feast for the eyes. With so many beauties gathered together, and the kind that cultivated both inside and outside, even the beauty contest in her previous life probably couldn't reach this level of standard. After all, those people were beautiful. But could they be good at zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting? Learning and cultivation? Jingwan secretly praised in her heart. This trip was really too right. Facing so many beauties, even eunuch Mu couldn't help but take a few more glances. The most indifferent was probably Li Hongyuan, especially when he saw Jingwan's eyes, which seemed to be shining. She had never looked at him like this before. His expression instantly turned cold. If looks had killing power, these beauties would probably be disfigured. Li Hongyuan grabbed Jingwan's waist and walked straight to the pleasure boat. Although Auntie Mei and the others were squatting with their heads lowered, they could still see Li Hongyuan's movements from the corner of their eyes. Naturally, they hurriedly signaled the people behind them to disperse and not block the way. Jingwan retracted her attention and turned her head to look at Li Hongyuan. When she turned around, she understood his current state and couldn't help but laugh. Li Hongyuan looked at her from the corner of his eyes. Is it very funny? His face darkened even more. Jingwan quickly reached out to stroke his back and smooth his hair. No, absolutely not. But Li Hongyuan's expression didn't improve at all. Perhaps we should go back now. Sometimes, I even wonder if I shouldn't have brought you out. My heart is playing more and more cross-country. Today, we chartered the pleasure boat. Tomorrow, will we go directly to the brothel? There should be Nanfeng Restaurant in Jiangnan. Do you want to see it? Jingwan really didn't know what to say. When this man was childish and petty, he was just like a 3-year-old child. At this time, it was best not to say anything. She looked at him, focused on him, and treated him as the whole world. She didn't ask about the scenery in front of her, didn't ask about the road under her feet, and then even if Li Hongyuan didn't look at her, his face softened. He reached out to cover Jingwan's eyes. Don't look. Jingwan smiled like a flower. Li Hongyuan turned his head to look at her. You're sure that I won't do anything to you? All right, all right. This good time and beautiful scenery don't disappoint. The voices between the two people hadn't been restrained. Mei Yi and the others didn't dare to look directly at Li Hongyuan. They could only tell from his clothing that the person standing next to him was a man. At first, when they saw Jin Qinhuang's movements, they were surprised that he was actually Nanfeng. But when this person opened his mouth, the woman's voice couldn't be more obvious. Now that they understood the reason for Jin Qinhuang's appearance, it couldn't be said that they weren't shocked. However, this kind of thing, it was best to block it in the stomach. No matter if other people knew or not, in short, it couldn't come out from their own mouth. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653807. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Exempt from registration. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com mobile reading website. Chapter 330. Li Hongyuan brought Jingwan to a short table and sat down. This net is worth your collection. Soon after, the others followed in. On their side, there was only Yu Zhongqing, Li Suyen, and Yi Mu Gonggong, the black and white beauties, as well as 2 female guards. Fortunately, Mei Yi was already prepared. She had already thought of the situation where Jin Qinhuang brought more people. She hurriedly waved to both sides, and the 2 pleasure boats that were parked 3 zhang away quickly rowed over. The remaining people were divided into 2. Li Hongyuan slightly frowned. The more unfamiliar people there were, the greater the danger. Moreover, even if the pleasure boat was big enough to stay in this space together, it was still quite crowded in Li Hongyuan's eyes. It was also very annoying to look at. As someone who followed Li Hongyuan all year round, how could Mu Gonggong not know? He quivered. Boat owner, there are too many people here. I'll have to trouble you to send some to the other 2 pleasure boats. People like Mei Yi and the others naturally paid attention to the reactions of the guests at all times. If it was an ordinary guest, even if it was a high official, she could still talk and laugh freely and even show off her flirtatiousness. However, because of the other party's noble status, she couldn't stare at them as a matter of course. Moreover, there was that aura that kept strangers away. Also, the person dressed as a man was most likely Jin Qinhuang Fei. Thus, she could only watch carefully. When she saw Jin Qinhuang's frown, she knew that he was displeased. However, she didn't know the reason at all. Fortunately, she received a reminder in the next moment. Naturally, she didn't dare to have any neglect. There were nearly 30 servant girls serving on this boat. She gritted her teeth, and only 4 were left. The rest were all sent away. This time, the people on the pleasure boat were basically cut down by half. Why were there so many servants on the pleasure boat? It was because the 12 people behind Aunt May were the best of the 12 families. These people all had 2 servant girls by their side to serve them. In addition to the people Aunt May had prepared for emergencies, there were so many people. Originally, he didn't think much of it, but now it seemed that he really didn't think much of it. As for the leading ladies of each family, there was no one to serve them. In the future, they would do everything by themselves. In Aunt May's opinion, this was not a big deal. Not to mention what could happen on this pleasure boat. At least half of the 12 of them had served others before. Although they had lived a pampered life for a few years, it was not to the extent that they could not live without others at all. The gaily painted pleasure boat began to glide on the surface of the water leisurely. Outside the boat were some strong old maids. They seemed to be very good at steering the boat and were unusually stable. The other 2 pleasure boats were less than half a zhang away from each other, half a boat's length behind. Today's main guest was Jingwan. The others were all accompanying guests. So naturally, whatever Jingwan said was what it was. However, these people had never accompanied a female guest before. For a moment, they didn't know what to do. Moreover, it was fine if it was an ordinary person, but her status was honorable and they couldn't afford to offend her. As the other's husband, Jin Qinhuang sat beside Jingwan and poured himself a cup of tea. He didn't have any intention to speak and was completely accompanying the guests. In the end, it was Jingwan who spoke first and broke the silence. You don't have to care about it. Do what you need to do. I'm purely curious. That's why I appeared here. Speaking of which, if it was revealed, her reputation would be damaged the most. If it was spread back to the capital, she might not be able to be a Wangfei. She was the most relaxed person. In the end, it was because she had absolute trust in Li Hongyuan. If it could be completely normal, it was not impossible. The problem was that the pleasure boats and brothels, whether it was singing or dancing, all had a decadent color. It was not suitable. If Wanya and Gongzi don't mind, this slave will play a song for the 2 of you. In the silence, Daybreak stood up and crouched down with a pipa in her arms. Jingwan's gaze fell on Daybreak. Among these people, her impression of Daybreak was quite deep. Compared to the others, Daybreak's temperament was more prominent. Perhaps it was because of this line of work. The others more or less had a bit of a prostitute's aura. Even now, whether it was their dressing or words and actions, some subtle movements still exposed this point. If one didn't know that they were in this line of work, perhaps they wouldn't have noticed that Daybreak didn't have this kind of feeling. There was another point. Just now, after they sat down, these people came in and naturally saw the appearance of the husband and wife. Even Mei Yi's eyes flashed with amazement, not to mention the others. Until now, their eyes seemed to fall on a certain person. Only Daybreak's gaze was completely restrained at the beginning. Moreover, there was no fluctuation in her eyes. It was as if this person was the same as the others she had seen. There was no special point. There were 2 possibilities for this kind of person. First, their heart was like still water, or even like stagnant water. Second, to attract attention. Okay, Jingwan smiled and nodded. Daybreak walked towards a small stage in front of them and sat down quietly. Her fingers plucked at the strings of the zither. From the beginning, it was clear that this was not the decadent music that was popular in the brothels. It was gentle, comfortable, and also bright and beautiful. It was as if a breeze had been added to the cool surface of the river. Not only that, Daybreak's movements were also very beautiful. More importantly, she was very focused. She was so focused that it seemed like there was only the zither in her hands left in the world. The current Daybreak reminded Jingwan of her sister-in-law, Sanijia. Comparing a prostitute to a noble lady from the Duke's public house was definitely a humiliation to the latter. However, in reality, Daybreak was even better. Jingwan wasn't the only one who was attracted. Li Honyuan also slightly focused. It was obvious that this skill had reached a rather high level. Jingwan held her chin and listened quietly. It was unlikely that this was a woman whose heart was like stagnant water. Could it be that she was really trying to attract their attention? Of course, Jingwan wouldn't jump to such a conclusion. After all, some people were indifferent to other things and only focused on one thing. When the song ended, Jingwan couldn't help but clap her hands and praise sincerely. Daybreak seemed to have returned to her senses because of the applause. She stood up, squatted down, and returned to her original position. Regardless of how others looked at Daybreak, whether they thought that she was scheming or not, she remained quiet. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653812. HTML. Please click here to report an error. Registration is not required. We will handle it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken.com. Mobile version, reading website, mbicken.com. Chapter 331. Of course, Jingwan looked at it with a pure appreciation of art and did not feel that there was any problem with this dance. In fact, in the previous life, by chance, Jingwan had seen a special performance. In addition, perhaps due to Jingwan's identity, during the dance, her eyes never fell on Li Honyuan. Jingwan's good mood naturally would not be affected. From start to finish, she watched with great interest and was not stingy with her applause at the end. Moving net from this, she had roughly grasped her temperament in this aspect and said that it made people feel slightly relieved. Mei Yi knelt in the lower position and gently exhaled. She could also see that this Jin Qian Wangfei might really be curious. However, when she looked at them, she did not have a strange gaze. Not only that, any random girl here might be better than her in terms of appearance, but there was not a bit of jealousy in her eyes. Her attitude was quite good. Looking at them, it was more like admiring a beautiful scenery, a beautiful painting, an exquisite piece of porcelain. Her eyes were full of admiration. To be able to cultivate this kind of attitude was actually not an easy thing. The environment of the maternal family before marriage, the attitude of the husband's family after marriage, especially the husband's attitude, were all crucial. This Jin Qian Wangfei should have been good before marriage. As for now, needless to say, Jin Qian Wangfei only occasionally looked at the person performing in front of him and did not contain any emotions. His eyes were very calm, as if he was looking at an ordinary person, an ordinary object. Compared to Jin Qian Wangfei, he was far from qualified. More often, his gaze was on Jin Qian Wangfei. As long as he looked at her, his gaze could not help but soften. Moreover, she did not need anyone to wait on her, and instead personally peeled grapes for Jin Qian Wangfei. Looking at her skillful posture and seeing that there was no difference in the expressions of the people following her, one would know that this was definitely not the first time. Jin Qian Wangfei, that was the person held at the tip of Jin Qian Wangfei's heart. If he did not spoil her to the extreme, how could he agree to such a willful request? It must be known that if this kind of thing was spread out, it would not only damage Jin Qian Wangfei's reputation. Jin Qian Wangfei himself would also be implicated. Auntie May retracted her gaze. Some people were really born to make others jealous. Not only did they have the same status, they were also pampered and loved wherever they went. After grasping the basics, Aunt May basically knew how to act. Naturally, she was no longer as reserved as she was in the beginning, not knowing what to say. She was careful and eager, but she also grasped it just right. She grasped it to the point that it would not make people feel disgusted, and she had always addressed Jingwan as Little Gongzi. To a certain extent, Aunt May could be considered a knowledgeable person. Although she wasn't a native of Chuanzhou Prefecture, she had spent 70% of her time in this prefecture city. She was quite familiar with the customs of the people and had many things at her fingertips. If one didn't know her background, they might have thought that she was a noble lady from some family. Speaking of the delicacies of the Chuanzhou residents, we have already prepared a banquet without your permission. But because it's still early and the weather is hot, we decided to follow the rules of a banquet and prepared 2 dishes at once. What do you think, Your Highness and Little Gongzi? If there is anything inappropriate, the owner of the boat has troubled us. This is good. There is nothing inappropriate. Jingwan said with a smile. Some things, even if one knew that it was troublesome, it was best not to refuse. Perhaps it should be said that this topic was brought up at the right time. Just as her voice fell, the first 2 dishes were delivered. They were first inspected on the pleasure boat by the side, before being delivered to Jingwan and the others. No one felt that there was anything wrong. The first 2 dishes looked quite exquisite and exceptionally gorgeous. To be honest, it was not worse than the most gorgeous imperial banquet. But there were some things that were pleasing to the eye, but not useful. Aunt May introduced the main ingredients of the 2 dishes, as well as their origins. Although she didn't know that it was time for the main meal, Jingwan's appetite was still good. Aunt May saw it, but the 2 servant girls following her didn't have any intention to serve her. Aunt May was a little hesitant about whether to serve her. Jingwan directly started, but before she could eat, Li Honyuan suddenly knocked on the table with his fingertips. Jingwan looked sideways at him and smiled. Wait, let me try first. Then she unceremoniously put it into her mouth. In the end, it was intercepted by Li Honyuan halfway. With a little force, he put it into his mouth with chopsticks and chewed it carefully. He looked at Jingwan with a faint smile. Our little Gongzi Luo can't do anything disrespectful just because he is favored by this prince. In fact, there was a tacit understanding between the 2 of them. Logically speaking, with Gong Jiu's ability, there was probably no poison in the world that could be hidden from him. However, there were no absolutes. Now was a special time. If Jingwan wanted to taste the dishes, how could Li Honyuan allow it? Jingwan was helpless, but when she thought of something, she gave up. She suspected that someone might have resistance to poison. As the saying goes, the world is big and there are many strange things. In her previous life, there were some people with special physiques. His special physique didn't seem to be a surprising thing. The taste is not bad. Our little Gongzi can try it. Jingwan raised her eyebrows. Most poisons need a process to take effect. His tongue can detect the poison? Since Prince said so, this student will naturally not be polite. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653814. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is free. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com mobile version, reading website, mbicken.com. Chapter 332. Auntie May's worries were not unfounded. When the 3rd dish was delivered, a voice that was neither light nor heavy came from the pleasure boat beside them, but it was enough for the main pleasure boat to hear clearly. This dish's color is not very good, so don't send it to master. Jingwan could clearly hear that it was Gong Jiu's voice. Nonsense, our restaurant. The person who delivered the dish clearly wanted to refute, but his mouth was quickly covered, and he was detained along with the dish. Aunt May thought that she had experienced many storms, but at this moment, she couldn't stop her heart from palpitating. Although she tried her best to control her expression, she still revealed some clues. And those top courtesans on the pleasure boats seemed to have realized that something was wrong, just like the two who were performing together. They kept making mistakes. Li Honyuan put the wine cup in his hand on the table. It was a little heavy. If you haven't practiced it well, don't take it out and make a fool of yourself. The sound of the zither came to an abrupt stop, and the dancing woman seemed to be frozen in an instant. It looked a little funny. Jingwan reached out and patted him. They were all delicate women. Although they were in a brothel, it was obvious that with their status, most of the time, they would be flattered by others. Now that they were frightened, wouldn't it spoil their mood? Since they were going out to have fun, naturally, it would be best to avoid unpleasant things. Jingwan waved her hand, indicating for them to go down. The two of them felt as if they had been pardoned. They went up to the second floor with the excuse of changing clothes. Jingwan took another cup, poured some wine, and pushed it in Aunt May's direction. Boat owner, don't be nervous. Drink a cup of wine and calm down. Little Gongzi, you're too kind. How could a lowly servant like her bear the wine personally poured by the prince consort? It's just a cup of wine. It's not necessary. Drink. His Highness has always been magnanimous. If this dish is not cooked, even if he wants to pursue the matter, he should pursue the fault of the restaurant. As long as the owner of the boat has nothing to do with the restaurant, he naturally won't vent his anger on you. Jingwan said unhurriedly, as if it was really just a dish that was ruined. Aunt May composed herself. Her meaning could not be more obvious. This matter would be investigated. As long as it had nothing to do with her, she would not be angered because it happened on her boat. Little Gongzi is right. His Highness is wise and observant. He leaned forward slightly and took the wine cup on the table. Thank you, Little Gongzi. Even so, he still felt uneasy. It seemed that he had booked a table of dishes, but in fact, he had ordered all kinds of signature dishes from various big restaurants. He had just ordered them according to the scheduled time and asked them to cook and deliver them on time. Now, there was a big mess. This dish was ruined. Would there be a second dish, a third dish, or even more? In fact, the best way was to not serve the following dishes, but it was not up to her to decide. It was just that they all said that the son of a wealthy family should not sit under the awning. Since he knew that there was danger, why didn't Jin Qinhuang order to stop it? Even if he wanted to lure the snake out of its hole, the things that were sent over should not be eaten. If he didn't vent his anger now, if something happened one after another, it would ruin his mood. Everything would become unknown. Jingwan declined to comment and turned to look at the beauties. Continue. Who's next? In fact, at this time, no one was willing to take the lead, fearing that they would make a mistake. However, there were 12 people, and the first round was not over yet. Previously, Daybreak was the first to stand up. Because the situation was not right, she set a good start, but it was inevitable that people would feel that she had ulterior motives. However, they forgot that she was originally the one to start. If they followed the original order, the next lead was a bit timid and could not adapt to the current atmosphere. If she stood up, it would be bad for her to stand up. Mei Yi winked several times, but was indifferent. She helplessly signaled to the people behind her. However, each and every one of them did not want to see, and pretended to be deaf and mute. Mei Yi's heart was filled with anger. Daybreak glanced at Mei Yi and sighed in her heart. She once again stood up. Otherwise, when trouble came, Mei Yi would be the first to bear the brunt. After all, she was the one who raised her with extravagance. Disregarding the factors that people did not want to face, there was still some true feelings. She could not ignore it. This servant suddenly thought of a suitable song and boldly took up the time of the other sisters. I will embarrass myself once more. I hope that Prince and young master will agree. Everyone was well aware of the current situation. Jingwan had a good impression of Daybreak and naturally would not be unwilling. It was naturally better to not break the good atmosphere. In comparison, Auntie May's heart was even more complicated. She had always felt that Daybreak had not adjusted her mentality. How could a brothel not be stained with dust? Although she sometimes mocked her, she had never truly suppressed her to completely fall, nor did she use any means to dye her black. She had even imperceptibly protected her innocence and sincerity. She was clearly an old pimp, and doing this was simply unreasonable. However, when something really happened, she was probably the only one who would stand up. Eunuch Moose said that his master liked clean people. This was not wrong. What kind of person was Li Hongyuan? What Jingwan could see, he naturally could see more clearly. Under normal circumstances, he did not have a good impression of women outside. Only the people who served Jingwan had a good impression of her. It was rare for Daybreak to be ranked below them. However, it was probably like this. Even if he met her again in the future, his impression of her would not improve. But it was obvious that he would not meet her again. Li Hongyuan's subordinates naturally moved quickly. Li Suyen stepped on the railing at the edge of the pleasure boat. With one leap, she landed on another pleasure boat. She took 2 people and the waiter and left on the small boat that delivered food. If one wanted to investigate something, it was naturally better to move as fast as possible. Speaking of which, Linchuan River was very wide. It was not much inferior to the moat in the capital. Listening to the leisurely sound, Jingwan changed her location and sat on the railing. Below her was the clear river. Looking ahead, she could see boats coming and going. The riverbank was verdant and lush with willows. There was also an endless stream of traffic. The pedestrians were either lazy or in a hurry. There was an illusion of peace and tranquility. Jingwan leaned on the railing. Her chin rested on the edge of the railing. She stretched out a hand and hung it naturally. She probably wanted to feel the moisture of the water. However, the railing on the boat was high enough. Naturally, she could not reach it. During this period of time, she had been entertaining those officials' wives. Although she occupied a high position and held absolute control, she was absolutely bored. This kind of relaxed and unrestrained nature naturally made people happy. Li Hongyuan sat in his original position, drinking by himself. Jingwan was admiring the scenery. She was the most beautiful scenery in his eyes. When Li Hongyuan turned around to take the wine bottle again, a woman came forward attentively. She was obviously prepared to serve him. His gaze was stern. That woman immediately stiffened. Her gaze shifted and landed on Mei. When the people below made a mistake, it was always right to find the people above to take the blame. Mei was originally focused on Jingwan and did not notice this. Li Hongyuan's gaze was like a substance. She quivered and turned around. How could she not understand what was going on? She was so angry that she almost vomited blood. She quickly kowtowed to Li Hongyuan, but did not dare to make a sound for fear of startling Jin Qinhuang Fei. Li Hongyuan silently withdrew his gaze. Mei stood up and grabbed that woman. She even used her hand to block her mouth. She fiercely pinched her arm and coldly reprimanded her in a low voice. If you dare to make a sound, I guarantee that you won't be able to see tomorrow's sun. She dragged her to the side. On the other side, because of the half-hanging curtain, Jingwan's line of sight was more or less cut off. In front of other people, she fiercely pushed. That woman fell to the ground, her back hitting the edge of the short table. She fiercely sucked in a breath of cold air, her face deathly pale. The bystanders did not have any sympathy. After all, as the top hostess of the 12 brothels and pleasure boats, they were genuine competitors. If the situation was not special, they would definitely not gather in one place and coldly watch. They even moved to the side. Regardless of whether they had the same idea as her, as long as they did not act, it seemed that they could despise her. Auntie May bent down and pinched her chin. She lowered her voice, but it was still cold. You're so blind. If you were someone from my pavilion boat, I would have thrown you into the river and drowned you. It's not wrong to want to climb up the social ladder and get rid of your current status, but you have to look at the situation. to teach you such a thing, and to call yourself the top hostess. Any random girl from the other families is better than you. It's no wonder that the famous leader 10 years ago has fallen out of the top 10. If you dare to make trouble again, even if you're not someone from Pavilion Boat, I will skin you alive. Mei Yi stood up and tidied her clothes. Only then did she return with a faint smile. Clearly, this small change did not attract Jingwan's attention. Then, she inadvertently saw a pleasure boat in the distance approaching. Her purpose could not be more obvious. She turned around and met Li Hongyuan's gaze. She smiled faintly and said, "Prince, there are visitors." Li Hongyuan's gaze shifted slightly. Naturally, he saw the pleasure boat. Just let them return. To dare to come at this time, I'm afraid it's not an ordinary person. Prince might as well wait until you understand the identity of the visitor before making a decision. You're the one who loves to worry. No matter who it is, it's not like there won't be a chance after today. I won't see them. Some friendships between men are not built in brothels. This person didn't come early or late, but chose this time. How can it not arouse suspicion? Jingwan smiled with a deeper meaning. I'm going to change. She got up and walked toward the stairs. Bai Xiao and Mei exchanged a look. Bai Xiao nodded slightly and quickly followed. His wife had spoken. Li Hongyuan naturally had to meet them. But to disturb his good mood, someone had to pay for it. Receiving the master's signal, seeing the other party getting closer and closer, a pleasure boat at the side sped up and blocked the main pleasure boat. There's a pleasure boat in front. Quickly, detour. The music that originally came from the pleasure boat gradually stopped. The surrounding curtains were quickly hung up. A person who seemed to be in charge quickly walked to the bow, exceptionally respectful and modest. Is Prince Jin on the pleasure boat? My master is a salt merchant from Jiangnan, surnamed Tai. He requests an audience with Prince. Li Hongyuan practiced martial arts, and his ears were sharp. The sound in front was not loud, but because he paid attention, he could hear it clearly. Logically speaking, insignificant merchants naturally had no qualifications to have an audience. However, there were always some people who were exceptions. Among Jiangnan's great salt merchants, there was only one with the surname Tai. The others with the surname Tai were mostly his clansmen and followed his lead. Li Hongyuan investigated the salt policy, so he naturally knew about these great salt merchants. Jiangnan's #1 salt merchant was naturally the most important. It was no wonder that the other party dared to come knocking. Speaking of those greedy people, out of 10 people, there would definitely be 10 who received benefits from this person. This was the connections in the hands of these merchants. This iron salt head was ruthless in bed and had a special hobby for the person beside him. In business, he was very skilled. He treated his subordinates with a sense of tension and was clear about rewards and punishments. He was also not stingy with his clansmen. As the head of a clan, he had a very heavy right to speak. He was even very far-sighted. He chose a few clansmen with better qualifications and moved them out of the clan. He fully supported the younger generation to study and walk the path of an official. Even 2 or 3 of his own sons were sent out for foster care. In another 10 years, no, it didn't even need 10 years. As long as one of them became an official, with his financial resources and a good choice of path, he would be able to skyrocket. As long as one stood firm, he would naturally be able to pull up the others. One day, he would be able to make the entire clan stand up. A mere merchant, yet he had the ambition to make the entire clan a prestigious clan. Li Hongyuan gently knocked on the table and drank slowly. When the words came from the front, he still had a lazy expression and ignored them. However, if he didn't speak, the others naturally didn't dare to do anything. The people in the officialdom had to be dealt with, so these salt merchants naturally couldn't be let go. Of course, he wasn't in charge now, so there had to be a limit to how he dealt with them. After all, if he dealt with these salt merchants, it would also cause chaos. Not only would it affect their intricate network of relationships, but it would also cause civil unrest. Therefore, he had to be careful when dealing with them. Iron Salthead might not have anything to say to his own people, but he was ruthless to the outside world. Moreover, his business was too big. The price of salt in some places could be decided by him with a single word. If he colluded with the officials and merchants, in the end, only the common people would suffer. Therefore, this person was bound to be on the list of people to be cleaned up. When Li Hongyuan slowly finished the wine in his cup, he gave a signal. However, he didn't intend to let anyone board the pleasure boat they were on. He just let the two pleasure boats side by side, with a distance of 1 zhang between them. Iron Salthead was really, as the rumors said. He had a big belly, and his smile was like the Maitreya Buddha. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that his wealth was comparable to that of an aristocratic family. However, his clothes weren't very luxurious, and there wasn't the slightest bit of the aura of a nouveau riche. Those who didn't know would think that he was a person with excellent cultivation. Even if he was surrounded by beauties, he didn't feel anything. Facing Li Hongyuan, he respectfully saluted. This commoner greets Jin Wangya. In contrast to Iron Salthead, Li Hongyuan leaned back with a leisurely expression. He Mei knelt beside him to serve him. It could be said that he was enjoying himself. Hearing this, he only slightly tilted his head to take a look. Then he unconcernedly withdrew his gaze and continued to drink and listen to music. Seeing Ben Wang, what's the matter? Iron Salthead couldn't quite grasp Li Hongyuan's thoughts. He wasn't sure whether this Jin Wangya had the ability or not. After all, many things about him were rumors, and he didn't dare to make a conclusion. After a moment of consideration, this commoner heard that Wangya has booked more than 10 pleasure boats and will perform the 100-boat ferry today. The 100-boat ferry has been famous for a long time, but it hasn't appeared for decades. Would this commoner have the fortune to see it? Li Hongyuan sneered. He finally sat up straight and looked at the other party. The 100-boat ferry is so grand. Did Ben Wang block Linchuan River, or what? Thinking about it, it was obvious that the 100-boat ferry would be more grand than the Dragon Boat race on the Dragon Boat Festival. It would inevitably attract the attention of countless people. Li Hongyuan didn't order an eviction, and he wouldn't do such a thing. Naturally, anyone could see it, anyone could reward it. However, the 100-boat ferry used pleasure boats, and the performers were all prostitutes. There would be many people who would avoid arousing suspicion. This commoner was ignorant. Iron Salt had hurriedly said with a bit of apology, "You came to find Ben Wang for this?" Whether it was Li Hongyuan's expression or tone, it was obvious that he was displeased. That's not the case. This commoner obtained a rare item some time ago. At first glance it looked like a jade-like stone, but when you looked at it, there was a universe inside. Under the surface, there was a natural-born Qi Yuan map. It was very lifelike. This commoner thought that only the imperial family was worthy of such an item. Therefore, this commoner was bold enough to offer this item to Wangya. Iron Salthead hurriedly explained. "Oh." Li Hongyuan seemed to be interested. "Let Ben Wang take a look." Yes. Iron Salthead was also clever. He hurriedly had someone bring the pleasure boat closer, and respectfully and carefully had someone bring out a square-foot wooden box. "Wangya, look. Yu Zhongqing, go get it." Yes. Yu Zhongqing responded. His movements were particularly clean and nimble. He quickly brought the item over. He opened it and placed it in front of Li Hongyuan, inside the wooden box, on top of a black velvet cloth. There was a stone with an irregular shape. Its surface was very smooth. Upon closer inspection, it was just as Iron Salt had said. There was a Qi Yuan map inside. Its shape was more than 90% similar. It looked like a level that could not be achieved by humans. Li Hongyuan took the wooden box and turned around. Sister He quickly tidied up the things on the table, leaving enough space for Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan was admiring this rare item, as if he had forgotten about everyone else. Although he did not show any joy, Iron Salthead guessed that he would like it very much. The people of the imperial family might not like rare treasures, but for this kind of thing with a good meaning, they would definitely not reject it. The pleasure boat retreated 1 zhang away, but Iron Salthead was still respectful. If you paid a little attention, you would find that his eyes fell on Sister Hay. Sister Hay's beauty was very unique. It was not the usual beauty with white skin, but the kind with a bit of wildness. Her beauty was very different. Because it was special, it was impossible not to attract attention. But for those who liked beauty, there were very few who would not be attracted to her. Even if they were not her type, because it was the first time they saw her, they would have the desire to hunt her. Iron Salthead's face did not show it, but the lust in his eyes was almost unable to be concealed. In fact, at Iron Salthead's side, there was another person, surnamed Su and named Wanting, but Jingwan forced her to change her name to Su Ting. However, that person already had an emergency. Right now, this woman who looked like a goddess was one of the many women at Iron Salthead's side. Her makeup was exquisite, but her clothes were really light. Compared to the prostitutes next to her, she was not inferior. However, to be able to stay by Iron Salthead's side for more than a month and still live well, it was enough to show that she was not ordinary. She only used a venomous gaze to look at Li Honyuan. It could be imagined that she was definitely not living well. Under the veil, those various scars were the best evidence. Thus, she hated Li Honyuan for not saving her. But now, she did not dare to show her face, and she could not even attract the others' attention. She also knew what Iron Salthead's character was like. She glanced at him and slightly sighed. If he noticed her strange behavior, she was afraid that she would not have a good ending. Li Honyuan looked like he was admiring the dance, but in fact, there was no fluctuation in his expression. Qi Yuan's territory was not only so small. In his previous life, he had more than doubled the territory of Qi Yuan. In this life, he would only surpass it. His wife was still on the dance floor, so he naturally had to send away the unrelated people. He closed the lid of the box, put away. He relaxed his body and prepared to continue admiring the dance. Yu Zhongqing said something in a low voice. Li Honyuan turned around. You still haven't left. Iron Salthead also knew that the imperial court's prince was different from the local officials. He had already prepared himself to be humble. But even so, when he was really looked down upon to this extent, he could not help but be angry. However, he could not show it in the slightest. He tried his best to maintain his calm. This commoner will take his leave now. If there is a chance, I will pay my respects to Prince. Li Honyuan waved his hand perfunctorily. Iron Salthead gritted his teeth and endured. Right now, the entire Jiangnan was not peaceful. If he was not careful, he might be implicated. Therefore, if he could get in touch with Prince Jean, not only would he be able to get rid of the possible danger, he might even be able to take advantage of this to reach the heavens. He closed his eyes and suppressed the negative emotions in his heart. In his plan, he did not expect to achieve his goal today. The current situation was just a little worse than what he had expected. In the past, when he planned something, it was not a problem to use several years of time. If he failed once, it was not a big deal. Iron Salthead was deflated. A certain Su family's daughter was naturally happy. However, the hatred in her heart also became stronger. If she could stay by Prince Jin's side, how could she endure the humiliation of this man who was as fat as a pig every day? She always thought of revenge and escape. Unfortunately, she could not do it because she did not want to die. Not long after Iron Salthead's pleasure boat left, Jingwan came down from the upper deck and sat beside Li Honyuan. I saw Su Wanting. Su Wanting? Li Honyuan seemed to think for a moment before he remembered who it was. She's just an item that was sold by her own father. Why pay attention to her? In Kai Mingfu, Su Wanting said that she was at the end of her rope. Thinking about it now, her words at that time were not completely false. But even so, Jingwan did not feel that what she did was wrong. Naturally, there is no need to pay attention to her. I'm talking about her father. Rest assured, I know what to do. Jingwan nodded and no longer asked. She just thought that her own husband might not have noticed and reminded him. Like this, unknowingly, 2 hours had already passed. Mei Yi hesitated and stepped forward. Wang Yi, little Gongzi, it's almost time. How about we go to Wanhua Tai now? If so, then let's go. Jingwan nodded. Hua Tai was located near the Linchuan River near the Red Lantern Lane. Most of it was built in the water. When they first saw it, it was a 3- or 4-story tall giant lantern, unique and exquisite. Jingwan's pleasure boat was docked on the water's surface in front of them. Mei Yi invited them to the 3rd floor of the pleasure boat. In the place where Jingwan predicted the fake floor, there really was a 3rd floor. Although it was small, it had all the essentials. The furnishings inside might not be expensive, but they were quite exquisite. The large window was opened, and the giant lantern could be seen. Jingwan had asked Mei Yi about the origin of this lantern and what it was used for. It turned out that more than 30 years ago, the richest man in Jiangnan had built it for a brothel girl. It consumed a lot of money, manpower, and material resources, with the intention of keeping a mistress in a golden house. But later, there was an unforeseen event. The richest man's family was ruined, and the girl seemed to have fallen into the hands of others. This Hua Tai later became the place where all the brothels and pleasure boats were ranked. And this ranking was naturally a competition between the girls of the various brothels and pleasure boats. Every year, the top 12 girls had the right to use it. The first 4 times, the second 3 times, and the third 2 times. As for the remaining 1 time, it was up to each family to decide what to do. What Mei Yi didn't say was that today's ceremony at dawn was also inside. Suddenly, the sound of drums came from the lantern. It was very rhythmic. As time passed, the lantern on the side of the pleasure boat, starting from the top, the wall moved from the middle to the 2 sides, slowly blooming like flower petals. Not to mention Jingwan, even Li Hongyuan was surprised. This design was really quite exquisite. After it was completely opened, it was a huge lotus-shaped stage. There were 2 petals at the front. One was submerged in the water, while the other was slightly curled. The highest part of the stage extended to the 3rd floor. It could be said that there were layers upon layers. The other parts of the stage were hollow. The craftsmanship was quite exquisite. At this moment, 12 large drums were distributed throughout the entire space. Some were above, some were below, some were inside, and some were outside. On top of each drum, there was a woman dancing. She was not dancing with graceful steps, but with a strong rhythm. She was wearing a simple yet heavy headdress that was like a net covering her head. There was also a jewel hanging between her eyebrows. Her upper body was only wearing a close-fitting dudu, and her lower body was wearing bloomers. Her wrists and waist were decorated with gold ornaments. She was gorgeous and charming. Jingwan saw some of the bright elements from her previous life. She couldn't help but be surprised. On the other hand, she was also more interested. It's very exciting. I think the boat owner has put in a lot of effort. Jingwan praised sincerely. Aunt Mei was a little flattered. Little master, you're too kind. She was also relieved. This kind of dance was naturally acceptable to men. But for women, there was a 99% chance that they wouldn't be able to accept it. According to the original plan, Aunt May's heart had been drumming. Fortunately, the whole dance could be said to be charming and passionate. There was a drumbeat in the middle that was like stepping on people's hearts. It was intense and exciting. After the dance, it still made people want to continue. The speed at which the drums were taken down was also very fast. It wasn't as difficult as Jingwan had expected. Then, many girls entered from different directions. Their waists were dressed in muslin dresses, and their outer covers were netted pearls with tassels hanging down. Their long sleeves were either on the petals or hidden behind the petals. Their figures were graceful, and the dance was beautiful. The whole body was divided into 12 parts. Occasionally, they would meet, but it didn't look messy at all. Obviously, it should be the same song. There were 12 kinds of choreography. Jingwan guessed that it was because the 12 families had temporarily merged together. It was really rare to be able to achieve such a level. And the ones who entered later also brought a big surprise. The petals were divided into 2, revealing a flight of stairs from the top to the bottom. There was a small platform in the middle. A girl appeared at the highest position. She walked along the stairs, dancing as she went down. After a few steps, she stopped and a clear and pleasant song sounded. Then a second girl appeared. Then a third, a fourth, and finally a total of 6 people. They were all the girls who had been accompanying on the boat. To be able to be called the lead, they naturally weren't bad at all. And what really surprised Jingwan was that there seemed to be sound amplification. Otherwise, with such a distance, they shouldn't be able to hear it so clearly. With the rise of the Wanhua platform, it naturally attracted more and more people. And if they wanted to enjoy the performance of the Wanhua platform, they naturally had to be on the water. But they didn't dare to occupy the best position, because 10 zhang away from the 3 boats, there were many other boats. In order to get the best position, there was naturally a situation where they suppressed others. However, in the middle of these people, a black-clothed guard with a knife suddenly appeared, and everyone immediately fell silent. At some point, a melodious and lingering sound came from both sides. She faintly heard that the 100-boat crossing had begun. Small boats of various shapes and sizes, exquisite and beautiful. There were people dancing, people playing instruments, and several people dancing together. Some people showed off their golden voices. The boats were changing on the water, but the people who were rowing the boats couldn't be seen. It turned out that they were hiding in the water. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653820. HTML. Please click here to report. Registration is free. We will handle it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com mobile version, reading website, mbicken.com. Chapter 333. Li Hongyuan's gaze fell on the water for a longer time, but he didn't know if there were enough people on the other side to dye the water red. Thinking of this, a faint smile appeared on his face with a bit of wickedness, and a bloodthirsty look that couldn't be seen in the depths of his eyes. His wife hoped that he wouldn't kill unless it was absolutely necessary. If someone came to his door to take his life, then he would kill as many as he could. His wife would definitely stand on his side and would never say the word no. Jingwan just happened to turn around to take the freshly cut fruit from the table and inadvertently saw his smile. No matter when she saw it, it would make her heart beat faster. He was indeed a scourge, an extraordinary evildoer. She immediately looked away and searched for his gaze, but it seemed to be just the surface of the water. Was it only his smile that was so alluring? Thinking of the past, every time she saw him smile like this, 8 out of 10 times, it was to seduce her. The remaining 2 times, it seemed like his stomach was full of evil water. Wangya, what are you thinking of? Jingwan asked with a smile. Li Hongyuan tilted his head to look at her. This husband just feels that today's scenery is exceptionally good. He generously gave Jingwan a smile that could make all living things fall for him. Jingwan silently looked away. Well, it was more interesting to enjoy the performance in front of her. Speaking of which, when would she be able to resist this scourge? Li Hongyuan saw Jingwan's expression and seemed to understand what she was thinking. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. Jingwan angrily glared at him and smiled. What are you laughing at? What's so funny? Bastard. Li Hongyuan gradually stopped laughing. If he really angered his wife, he would be the one to suffer. The gains didn't make up for the losses. At the beginning of the 100-boat crossing, it could only be considered a small commotion at most. Even so, the bystanders watched with great interest. The music in front gradually stopped, and a flat-top pleasure boat slowly came over. There was a string of musicians playing the guqin below, and above it was a large, half-open flower bud. When it reached a certain position, the flower bud slowly opened, and 2 pieces of white silk flew out, revealing a beauty who covered her face with one hand. The orchid fingers slowly moved downwards, revealing that gorgeous face. In the blink of an eye, Jingwan heard quite a few people shout out the two words daybreak at the same time. His popularity could not be said to be low. Jingwan finally knew the other party's name. It would be a pity for a woman like her to stay in a brothel. In this small world, Daybreak was able to play with a silk cloth that was more than 10 meters long. Her movements were graceful, and her dance was absolutely astonishing. From Jingwan's point of view, this could be considered as the rainbow feather dance. Although she didn't know how elegant the dance in the history of her previous life was, the dance choreographed by the people of the future was extremely wonderful. Daybreak's dance was even better. If it was in her previous life, such a person, even if she couldn't become a great dancer, with her face and talent, she could still become a celebrity who was sought after by countless people. Becoming the goddess of countless people's dreams was not a problem. Now, she was just a person who could be casually trampled on. Jingwan suppressed the discomfort in her heart. The times were like this, and she couldn't change anything. Moreover, wasn't there a lack of such places in her previous life? Because Jingwan and the others were the main guests, most of Daybreak's performance was naturally in front of their pleasure boat. Daybreak was only a butt. The 11 stars behind them took the stage one by one. Whether it was dancing or singing, there were all kinds of brilliant and varied styles. When this wave was over, the curtain of night had almost fallen. When they took the stage again, the pleasure boat and the flower boat were filled with specks of light. The kind of darkness that was not completely dark, and at the same time, the brightness was not high. There was a kind of hazy beauty to it. At the same time, the inside of the Wanhua stage was also lit up. Because it was indoors, the light from outside was weak, and the lights inside were naturally much brighter. When the 100-boat ferry started, the inside of the Wanhua stage naturally did not fall. Of course, there was a difference between the main and the secondary. When the inside was more exciting, the outside would be weaker. When the outside was the main, the inside would be weaker. When the curtain of night completely fell, another wave of excitement descended. Between the colors of the water, the lights became brighter and brighter. On the contrary, under the water, it became more and more quiet and dark. In the past, perhaps there were some hidden fishes, but now, who knew how much danger was hidden? When Jingwan was seriously watching, Li Honyuan leaned back and slightly raised his hand. An E immediately leaned forward. Li Honyuan whispered a few words, and an E immediately left. With the passage of time, the pattern changed again. The main stage changed back to the Wanhua stage. Countless petals fell from the top. Soon after, a square large flower basket was slowly lowered from the top. Daybreak, who had changed into a new outfit, was holding a pipa and dancing. The petals scattered down. That scene was a considerable realm of immortality. Without a doubt, after today, Daybreak's fame would go up another level. This was originally what Mei Yi wanted and also what she arranged. But her original purpose was to hope that she would attract Jin Qinhuang's attention and be able to let Jin Qinhuang bring her into that quagmire. However, seeing Jin Qinhuang's feelings for Jin Qinhuang, she knew that this was impossible. As a result, she somewhat regretted letting Daybreak stand out. But some things had already been arranged. It was too late to change it. She couldn't let Daybreak stand out and disrupt the plan. If the whole process was not perfect, it might anger Jin Qinhuang. The consequences were definitely not something that they could bear. Being sought after might not be a bad thing. If it was a prostitute, then it was not a good thing. Perhaps because of their status, they could pick their customers. However, there were many rich and powerful people, and these people could not be offended. If they were not careful, they would be consigned to eternal damnation. Mei Yi's gaze fell on Jin Qinhuang's face several times. She wanted to open her mouth to let Jin Qinhuang Fei take her away. But after thinking about it, she knew that the possibility was not big. Not to mention the problem of reputation. There was probably no decent woman who would redeem a prostitute, who would foolishly do such a stupid thing as leading a wolf into the house. Even if the wolf really was not a wolf, it was hard to believe that it was not. In the end, she could only give up. Because they had already eaten the flowing feast before, although they did not eat much, they did not feel hungry. However, they still had to eat dinner. After all, it was much later than the usual time. Because when Meng Yang said that it was ready in the evening, Li Hongyuan also directly let it be served. It was not the flowing feast as before, but it was served all at once. Dishes were served one after another. Compared to before, this time, they were all servant girls dressed in uniform. Aunt May had ordered the dishes from the restaurant before and had taken advantage of a loophole. This time, she directly came out from the pavilion boat. From cooking to delivering the dishes, they were all people from the pavilion boat. She could trust them. However, she was still relieved too early. When the second-to-last dish neared the table, she suddenly threw the tray in her hand and the dish at Li Hongyuan. However, Li Hongyuan seemed to have eyes. His feet moved slightly, and his body leaned back, completely avoiding it. She did not succeed. The dagger that was hidden under the tray in her hand was swung out. Seeing that it was about to stab Li Hongyuan, her eyes flashed with pride. However, when the tip of the dagger was a few inches away from Li Hongyuan, it could not go any further. At the same time, it was accompanied by the sound of the sharp blade piercing into the flesh. The woman's eyes suddenly widened with astonishment. She slowly lowered her head, and the bright blade pierced through her body. Blood dripped down the tip of the dagger, drop by drop. In the blink of an eye, the dagger was pulled out, and the woman was ruthlessly thrown to the ground. When she fell to the ground, the woman behind her fell to the ground at the same time. Although they fell in two different directions, they were face to face, and the woman's expression before she died was a panoramic view. This time, it happened too quickly. When Jingwan turned back to look, Hei Mei and Bai Xiao had completely blocked her view. Wan, don't look. Li Hongyuan's voice was still monotonous, and there was even a unique gentleness in his voice when facing Jingwan. Jingwan frowned. She could roughly guess what was going on, but she did not insist on pursuing the matter. She turned her head and continued to watch the performance, but her heart could not calm down completely. Li Hongyuan did not need to say anything. Whether it was the floor or the table, everything was quickly cleaned up. Li Hongyuan turned around and sat beside Jingwan. Without any scruples, he pulled her into his arms. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653824. HTML. Please click here to report an error. Registration is not required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com mobile version, reading website, mbicken.com. Chapter 334. In contrast, the one who was the most frightened was Mei Yi, not only because of this bloody scene. After all, for a person like Mei Yi, even if she had experienced wind and waves, her life was full of ups and downs, thorns and thorns. Whether she was determined or ruthless, it did not mean that she could calmly face this kind of bloody scene. Also, originally, in order to prevent accidents, all the people on the pavilion boat still had an assassination. If it was not her subordinates, she could reluctantly not pursue the matter. But now, how could she escape responsibility after returning to her senses? Mei Yi quickly knelt on the ground. Compared to the shock brought by the bloody scene, she was more frightened now. Her body could not stop trembling. Wang Yes, slave. Li Hongyuan did not pay attention to her at all. Right now, he had to appease his wife. Well, Jingwan was actually not as serious as she imagined. No matter how big the stimulation was, it probably could not compare to the first time she saw Li Hongyuan slit people's throats like the god of death. She did not see the scene just now, so the stimulation could not be considered. It just affected her mood. She just loved to surf the internet. Jingwan patted Li Hongyuan's hand and leaned back. We will investigate this matter clearly. As long as it is confirmed that it has nothing to do with the owner of the boat, we will not make things difficult for the owner. You can cut it up. Mei Yi cautiously glanced at Jingwan. Seeing Jin Wanya's indifferent attitude, she slowly stood up, but her legs were still a little soft. Her mood was not good, so naturally, she was not in the mood to do anything. Li Honyuan put his hand on Jingwan's abdomen. Are you hungry? Let people go back and get some food? Jingwan shook her head. She was not hungry, but now she felt that there was a little bloody smell in the air. She did not have much appetite. Looking at the performance outside, she was a little absent-minded. Things will not end like this, right? If the assassination that she had painstakingly arranged was only of this level, she would be a little disappointed. But you can rest assured that they will not appear in front of us again. It was a dereliction of duty on the part of the inspector below to allow someone to get close to him and even hide a dagger. This kind of thing happened once, but it would never happen again. However, under normal circumstances, dereliction of duty should not exist. The people below really needed to be taught a lesson. With the current situation, Jingwan did not want to return home. Obviously, someone must have some plan. Perhaps he was also using this opportunity to fish. In fact, it was just as expected. While it was lively on the surface, a bloody battle had already begun in the dark. It was like trying to sink a pleasure boat, but before they could even get close, they had already encountered a powerful counterattack. The blood mixed together with the river water in the dark. Perhaps it was because it didn't cause any disturbances at all, so it tried to cause a disturbance in the crowd outside. However, the result was also silently eliminated. In the crowd, people on other pleasure boats were all dragged into the water. As for those in the water, as long as they were in the vicinity of Linchuan River, none of them were spared. Fortunately, it was night, and most people were attracted by the wonderful performance of the 100-boat ferry. If it was in broad daylight, it would definitely cause a big disturbance. Of course, it was impossible that no one noticed this. At least, the mastermind behind this murder was abnormally anxious after waiting for a long time without any good news. When he heard the hurried footsteps, he immediately became like a bird startled by the twang of a bow. After confirming that it was him, he slightly heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly went up to greet. How is it? The other party's face was pale, trembling as he spoke. Dead, dead. Not one of them came back. They were almost scared out of their wits by this news. Go quickly, leave this place immediately. However, when they turned around, they found that the Grim Reaper was already standing in front of them. They were like hungry wolves, and without any room to resist, they were taken down. And these people, there was only one word left in their hearts. It's over. They probably couldn't imagine how they would be defeated so quickly and so thoroughly. It was as if all their plans were right under the other party's nose, and there was also an indescribable fear. Although this was the first time they participated in the assassination of the Li family's royal family, they had heard a lot about this from their seniors. In the past 100 years, although there were times when they lost, there were more times when they won. It was how they tortured and killed the royal family's people, how they stirred up the royal family's fowls and dogs, and how they wrote down their brilliant achievements everywhere. Every time they heard about it, their blood boiled, and they wished they could personally experience it a few times. They really participated in it. Speaking of which, in the past 100 years, the so-called previous dynasty had completely become history. The reason why these people were still addicted to it and couldn't extricate themselves was largely based on 2 points. It was that group of rotten loaches that robbed them of their glory and wealth. They, the lowly people, could trample on the royal family and make the royal family fear them. The previous generation's brainwashing of the next generation basically started from this. Today's reality, however, gave them a fierce slap in the face. And Yi quietly boarded the pleasure boat. Master, the matter has been settled. Li Honyuan responded indifferently. Is it over? Jingwan leaned on Li Honyuan and asked softly. And it's over. Li Honyuan gently stroked her hair. It smells like blood. Jingwan's nose twitched. Is that so? Then we'll go back? I don't care for a while. Boat owner, it should be over soon. replying to young master, "It will be over in about a quarter of an hour." Aunt May immediately responded. Jingwan nodded. "It was only half an hour. Let's go back after we finish reading." "As you wish." https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653828. HTML chapter error. Click here to report registration free. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com mobile version, reading website, ambicken.com. One must know that everything was fine before nightfall. Even an idiot would know that something big had happened. One must know that more than one corpse had been discovered, with the color of the water. Who knew how many more there were in the river? Go quickly, hurry. Incessant urging voices rose and fell. They only wanted to leave this damned place as soon as possible. As for the romance, it had long been thrown beyond the 9 heavens. Now, they only wanted to go home and calm down. However, the hands and feet of the experts who usually rowed the boats didn't seem to listen to their orders. Moreover, they were all in a hurry to leave. Naturally, it became more chaotic. No matter if it was a private boat or a variety of pleasure boats, they all collided with each other. Naturally, curses rose one after another. That scene was really, even the courageous ones would tremble at this time. The timid ones couldn't even stand steadily. They were so scared that they peed and cried for their parents to go home. Jingwan and the others hadn't traveled far and naturally heard the commotion behind them. Although they couldn't hear clearly, they basically knew what had happened. How many people? Even though she knew that it was best not to ask, Jingwan still couldn't stop herself from asking. The question was a little specious. Li Honyuan still knew what she was asking. He stared at Jingwan for a moment and saw that there was only calmness in her eyes. More than 100. In fact, including those who were captured alive, there were more than 200 people. In order to take his life, this was not a small amount. If it was really just the people on the surface, the other party would definitely succeed. Jingwan slightly sucked in a breath of cold air. What about our people? How are the casualties? Wang. Young master, don't worry. Because we have already made arrangements, we have enough people. Only a few of our people were slightly injured. It's not a big problem. An E respectfully said. That's good. Don't be stingy with the medicine. Let them recover as soon as possible. As for the others, more than 100 dead people were deliberately left in the river. What kind of panic would it cause, and how uneasy the officials of the entire Chuanzhou prefecture would be? Jingwan didn't mention a word. It was those people who wanted her husband's life. No matter how many of these people died, she couldn't have the slightest bit of sympathy or pity. As for those officials who escaped from her husband's evil claws, those frightened commoners behind them. Jingwan's heart didn't have any waves, but Aunt May's heart couldn't be relaxed. Her heart was thumping wildly, and she even felt that she might suddenly die in the next moment. Even so, she still had to force herself to stay alert until Jingwan and the others were sent off the boat. At this time, the entire boat, except for her, there were only people holding the boat. There wasn't a single person serving her. It made the boat seem especially large and empty. Thinking of more than 100 dead people, although they weren't under her feet, they were in the same river and weren't too far apart. In the darkness, there was a ghostly aura, as if the entire boat would be swallowed up in the next moment. How could it not make people panic? Aunt May couldn't hold on any longer. She softly leaned on the shore table. Go back, quickly. Although the people holding the boat were also affected, but they weren't at the center of the incident. At least they could still use their hands. Aunt May returned to the pavilion boat and slightly recovered. After resting, she remembered the assassination attempt on the boat and hurriedly called for the people left in the building to inquire if anyone had come to the building to investigate. Li Suyen had indeed brought people to investigate. The facts proved that 2 of the servant girls on the pavilion boat had been replaced. Because it was dark and because of the nobles in front of them, they all lowered their heads. Therefore, they didn't notice that the 2 servant girls in the building didn't lose their lives and had already been sent back. Aunt May breathed a sigh of relief. This could be considered a blessing in the misfortune. Give the 2 little girls some silver as reward. Consider it as suppressing the shock. Rest for 2 more days. Yes. Presumably, you all know what happened at Wanhua Terrace. Pass down the words. No one on the pavilion boat is allowed to talk about this matter. If I know about it, be careful of your skin. Aunt May sternly said. This matter was obviously the work of Jin Qinhuang's subordinates. And the people who died were clearly the same as the 2 in the boat. Assassinating the current Qinhuang was simply eating a bear's heart and leopard's guts. However, the 100-boat ferry was led by her pavilion boat. If Jin Qinhuang didn't vent his anger, then she should be low-key and restrained. Otherwise, when the time comes, it would be her own doing. After dealing with this matter, although Aunt May felt tired, she didn't feel sleepy at all. Thinking about it, she decided to go see Daybreak. The other girls on the pavilion boat were all quite tired, but Daybreak was very calm. She ordered people to prepare warm water and bathed and changed clothes. It seemed no different from before. In the past, Daybreak was a bit special, but that special was within the range of people's tolerance. Who let her be the lead? Those special things should be enjoyed by her. But the special things now were different. She could still remain calm in that kind of matter. It was inevitable that people would feel strange. When she came back, even though they knew that she might have a meteoric rise, there were still people who walked around her. The lights in the room were still on. Aunt May knocked on the door. After waiting for a moment, Daybreak personally opened the door. Aunt May frowned. Where are the people around you? They were frightened. Their hands and feet are stiff from pouring a cup of water. So I let them go back and rest. Daybreak personally poured tea for Aunt May. Aunt May came back now. Is there something else? Nothing, just looking at you. Aunt May carefully sized her up. Her eyebrows were as calm and peaceful as before. Her expression was natural, as if she didn't know what had happened. Aunt May's heart couldn't help but feel strange. Daybreak, you don't know what happened in front of Wanhua Tai. Daybreak naturally understood what Aunt May was talking about. I know. Not only did she know, she had already noticed the abnormality in the river when she released the little flower lantern. The blood mixed in the water. Even though the smell had been diluted, it still didn't escape her nose. Blood pool mud. Whales everywhere, starving people all over the mountain. What haven't I seen before? I only heard that someone died and the river was dyed red. So what? I haven't even seen the corpse. What is there to be afraid of? Daybreak's voice was light. Aunt May was moved. She knew that Daybreak had been through a lot. In reality, many people in their line of work had their own stories. But what Daybreak had experienced was still shocking. She had never heard her talk about it before, so she didn't know what to say now. Aunt May doesn't need to worry about me. But Aunt May has been busy since yesterday and hasn't had a moment of rest. Today, you have been by noble lady's side, so you must be tired. Go back and rest early. There are many things in and out of this building that Aunt May needs to take care of, so you should take care of yourself. But Aunt May didn't leave. Everyone knows my own situation. You were in the limelight today, but I didn't know that everything was the will of Jin Qinhuang Fei. I should have listened to you yesterday, otherwise, it doesn't matter. Aunt May did it for me, I know. Jin Qinhuang is a noble descendant, but he has deep feelings for Jin Qinhuang Fei. Jin Qinhuang Fei's eyebrows are clear and upright, and she is kind on the inside. She is also infatuated with Jin Qinhuang. This kind of loving husband and wife is rare and valuable, and shouldn't be ruined by others. Daybreak's mood rarely fluctuated. Even if she needed to greet and send people off, she would only wear a smile on her face and be calm on the inside. At this moment, Aunt May rarely heard a trace of envy in her tone, but there was no jealousy. She probably also didn't yearn for it because she knew it was impossible and she didn't want to get involved in this kind of husband and wife. To their line of work, Daybreak was definitely different. Perhaps there were people who disdained her and thought that she was putting on an act. Perhaps there were people who scolded her for putting up a memorial arch. There were also people who were jealous and hated her. Everyone was dirty inside and out, but only you maintained a clean inside. It made people want to destroy you, dirty you, and drag you down with them. Aunt May had the latter kind of thoughts, but she also wanted to protect her. It was a contradiction. But now, she didn't mock her. You rest ba. And Aunt May also rest early when you go back. Aunt May nodded and left. In the end, what she wanted to say wasn't actually this. She wanted to tell her that the marriage ceremony wouldn't be delayed for more than a few days. As long as she didn't make any move to send her to Jean Qinhuang within 3 days, someone would come knocking. But even if she said it, she wouldn't have any reaction. Although her mood was a little bad a few days ago, in reality, she had already prepared herself. It wasn't that Aunt May had never seen someone who was calm, but she was very clear that the reason for Daybreak's calmness was different from other people. Moreover, this reason couldn't be asked. At the same time, all the officials in the Chuanzhou Institute were alarmed. The relevant personnel naturally crawled out of their beds and rushed to the scene without putting on their clothes properly. The unrelated personnel also stayed up all night and anxiously went to find out the specific details. They all knew that Jean Qinhuang had booked the pleasure boat today. On the Linchuan River, they didn't have the guts to join in the fun. They were afraid that Jean Qinhuang wouldn't be able to stand it and would suffer a calamity. In the end, they still couldn't escape this calamity. The officials held torches and sealed off the scene. The prefectural governor also personally came to the scene, trembling as he watched people salvage the corpses. The flow of Linchuan River was very slow. In this short period of time, the corpses were basically still in place. One by one, they were salvaged. To a certain extent, it could be said that it was quite crowded. One moment, one moment, one moment, one moment, it made people's hearts tremble. How could there be so many? Haven't they all been salvaged yet? Haven't they all been salvaged yet? The coroner had been examining from the beginning, and the results were basically the same. That was, the vital points were injured by a sharp blade. Most of them were fatal with one blow. There were only a handful of people who had more than 3 wounds on their body. In the end, it was confirmed that the river was clean. After a careful count, there were 192 corpses. Looking at the attire of these people, even if one used their toes to think, they would know what was going on. It was over. So many people tried to assassinate Jean Qinhuang. Even if he escaped this calamity, this matter was destined to not be able to protect his official position. The data had just been tallied. Not long after, the other officials basically knew the result. It was almost the same 2 words. It's over. And these people were really done for, not just because of this matter. However, even if it was like this, they couldn't be derelict in their duties and not do anything. Those who were still holed up at home hurriedly came out. At this time, they didn't care about what faction they belonged to, didn't care about whether they were responsible for this matter, and also didn't care if they were opponents. They just needed to discuss a grand plan together to minimize the possible serious consequences of this matter. Overnight, they found more than a dozen painters to draw everyone's faces. With so many people, it was impossible for all of them to be unfamiliar faces. Under normal circumstances, only merchants were more mobile, and the more large-scale caravans would have records of their movements. It was just purely unfamiliar faces entering the city. 1 or 2 was still okay, but it was impossible for nearly 200 people to not be noticed at all. It must be known that the people who had been guarding the gates for a long time were not vegetarians. As long as these people didn't suddenly pop up, if they searched the entire city, they would be able to find people who knew them. Even if it was only a small portion, they would follow the vine to the melon. In the end, it would be up to the heavens to what extent they could achieve. After Jingwan and the others returned, they had the kitchen prepare light and simple food. almost 70% full, they sat down, took a bath and rested. It was a good night's sleep. Compared to many people who couldn't sleep at night, it was simply too comfortable. The next day, just as they got up and finished breakfast, they heard from Eunuch Mu that the officials outside had been waiting for a long time and wanted to see their master. Tell them to come to this prince if they have any results. If they can't find anything, tell them to wash their necks for this prince. With Li Hongyuan's words, there was nothing more to say. They hurried to do the work. Countless copies of the portraits were made. All the people in the patrol office and the city guards were pulled out. These were still not enough. They even pulled out 2,000 prefectural soldiers from the barracks. The city gates that were closed last night were not opened at all. They went door to door and asked everyone to look at the portraits one by one. It was troublesome, and at the same time, it was possible to increase efficiency. Because they didn't know what happened, the people in the entire prefectural city were in a state of panic. At the same time, they were unusually cooperative. As a result, it didn't take long for there to be news. Once they found one person, they could basically implicate a lot of people. And a small number of these people had family members. There was no doubt that whether these people knew the truth or not, they wouldn't have a good ending. The old and the young all had the same ending. As long as it involved the remnants of the previous dynasty, they would rather kill the wrong person than let them go. When it came to Jingwan, she wouldn't say a word. When Jin Qinhuang was watching the 100 Boats Ferry, he was met with an assassination attempt. The other 11 families would certainly not end up well. Under normal circumstances, even if it had nothing to do with them, there was a 90% chance that they would be involved. Fortunately, Jingwan thought of this and sent people to greet them. Therefore, when these officials took the opportunity to be unreasonable and brought out Jin Qinhuang's name, each and every one of them could only act according to the rules and didn't dare to be presumptuous. Things went far smoother than expected. Although half of the people were, to some extent, visiting relatives and friends, and staying at a friend's house. In the evening, the officials pulled themselves together and asked for an audience with Jin Qinhuang. Li Hongyuan didn't give them the cold shoulder. Because he roughly knew, he didn't make things difficult for them. All right, Ben Wang won't pursue this matter. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. There was a feeling of coming back to life. Since Jin Qinhuang was unharmed and didn't pursue the matter, in addition to the special identity of the assassin, the emperor shouldn't punish them too harshly. However, this sigh of relief hadn't been completely relaxed when Jin Qinhuang started to release thunder again. Let's consider another matter. The people who were transferred over after the earthquake in Minshan County 3 years ago can scram. Those who didn't understand naturally looked left and right, and then respectfully retreated. However, those who knew, no matter how good their attitude was, they couldn't help but change their expression. What was called falling from the clouds into the dust. This was it. Li Hongyuan picked up the teacup and leisurely took a sip. Then he looked at them with a lazy expression. His eyes weren't necessarily sharp, but they somewhat couldn't bear it. When the time was almost right, Li Hongyuan opened his mouth again. Say it yourself. Your family members will at most be exiled. If the situation is better, you'll lose your family property, but you can return to your ancestral home in one piece. After 3 generations, there will be a chance to rise again. Wait for Ben Wang to say, the light punishment is that the women will be demoted to slaves and sent to the musical house. The men will all be stripped of their chastity and become the lowest servants. The heavy punishment is that the whole family will be executed. Don't cry injustice to Ben Wang, and don't tell Ben Wang that you don't know. Of course, if you have a fluke in your heart and want to test whether Ben Wang has evidence in his hands, you can speak without thinking. Come, invite the officials to leave and let them think carefully. Ben Wang doesn't mind waiting for one more night. Without giving them a chance to speak, they were all taken away. Each person was given a room. They only had one night. When Jingwan found out about this, she couldn't help but be impressed. This psychological warfare was really not an ordinary kind of smooth play. In fact, there wasn't much evidence in this matter. Those who were involved in this matter at the beginning knew the seriousness of the matter, so they cleaned up the matter very well. Of course, it was not impossible to investigate, such as investigating the whereabouts of tens of thousands of people, but it was too troublesome. Li Hongyuan didn't have time for that. Even if they suspected that he was cheating, they didn't dare to gamble. This night, some people had a much more painful night than the previous one. In the morning, Li Hongyuan was in a good mood for morning practice. He saw his wife practicing in the morning, only wearing a doo-doo and underwear. Her snow-white skin was moist, and she was sweating. In addition, Jingwan grew quickly during this period of time. Her appearance was very seductive. However, Jingwan was ignorant. She was focused on practicing yoga, and her figure was stretched to the extreme. Li Hongyuan's eyes became deeper and deeper. He didn't even hide the changes in his body. He didn't disturb Jingwan, but waited. When she finished practicing, Jingwan got up, adjusted her breathing, and then smiled at Li Hongyuan. In the next moment, her smile was a little stiff. This bastard was sitting so casually. That place couldn't be too obvious. And that gaze, what did it mean? It was like he wanted to eat someone. Jingwan looked around. When did the servants go out? There was no master and servant relationship at all. Yuan, sit for a while. I'll go wash up, and then we'll have breakfast together. She greased the soles of her feet and prepared to escape. But who was Li Hongyuan? He was a wolf whose eyes were green with hunger. How could he let the fat little lamb run away? As if he knew Jingwan's escape route, he intercepted her halfway. Instead of gently carrying her in a princess carry, he carried her rather rudely. Jingwan exclaimed, "Bastard." In exchange, she received 2 slaps on her butt. It didn't hurt, but it was dyed with a very thick color. He even rubbed it twice. Jingwan gritted her teeth. She wanted to bite someone, but she was sure that this bite would definitely make someone's arrogance rise. It wasn't like this hadn't happened before. Yuan, I'm sweating all over." Li Hongyuan put Jingwan on the bed and leaned over. "Why is it sweating? My little heart is the most fragrant. I'm hungry." "Okay, this husband will feed you right away." Li Hongyuan unceremoniously started to nibble. As a result, the Darren who were locked up to reflect on their actions clenched their fists and made a decision. However, after waiting for a long time, they still didn't see Jin Qinhuang's shadow. This made their hearts more and more uneasy. When the sun was high in the sky, Jin Qinhuang finally interrogated them. Each and every one of their eyes were already bloodshot. Li Hongyuan interrogated them one by one. He didn't even need to ask. He had already cleaned them up. The ones behind didn't dare to hide anything. They didn't dare to gamble. What's more, who knew if the people in front had already exposed them? https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/66533835. HTML chapter error. Click here to report. Registration is exempted. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Bicken. Com Mobile Edition Reading Website, mbicken.com. Chapter 336. Regarding this, Li Hongyuan's expression was indifferent. First, he appeased his wife, and everything else stood aside. Mobile Network Jingwan also calmed down very quickly. She closed her eyes and took 2 deep breaths, regaining her composure. But there was an indescribable coldness in her eyes. How did you deal with it? All the officials involved in Chuanzhou Fu have been imprisoned. The others have also been arrested. Don't worry. Even if they were transferred away, even if they are officials in the capital, they will absolutely not be able to escape. That's good. Letting these heartless people escape. The heavens really have no eyes. Jingwan didn't know that in her husband's previous life, this big case of inhumanity caused by greed had never been exposed. The heavens really had no eyes. Tens of thousands of lives died so silently. The blackguard was dispatched. The family members of the officials involved, regardless of whether they were masters or slaves, were all arrested. The houses of the masters were also sealed. During this process, there were naturally people who resisted. But who were the blackguard? They were a group of cold-faced killing gods. Even the old, weak, women, and children would not be merciful. When their heads were broken and bleeding, they did not dare to act shamelessly. They wailed and trembled as they supported each other. "Old Furin, what is going on? There is no news at all." They said to arrest people, and they arrested people. Jin Qin Wang Fei, clearly. "Shut up." The blackguard coldly pulled out his sword. Similar words were played out in the residences of the officials who were arrested. Because they did not know the exact reason, they only thought that it was a matter of salt policy. Thus, Jingwan became a typical example of taking money but not doing anything. With the blackguard present, they did not dare to curse out loud. But in their hearts, they cursed Jingwan from head to toe, from inside to outside, and all 8 generations of her ancestors. When they were all taken to the prison of the government office and met with the head of the family, who took off their official hat and official robes, they could not help but collapse. Their tears were like broken beads. "Laoi, master. What is going on? What is going on? Ah?" They struggled forward to grab the seal of the prison cell, wanting to ask clearly. The others also followed and wailed. "What are you howling for? Let's go." The saber hilt fell, but it did not recognize people. Seeing their pampered wives, their outstanding and smart children, and even their grandsons who were still in swaddling clothes, at this moment, they could not help but burst into tears. They tried to grab the hands of their loved ones, but their loved ones were mercilessly pushed away. Perhaps they would be locked up in a damp, gloomy place where insects and rats ran rampant. How could they bear it? How could they bear it? Li Suyen held the saber on his waist and straightened his back. His face was cold. "Do you regret it now? In the past 3 years, have you been haunted by tens of thousands of vengeful spirits in your sleep? Now you know how to cry? When you pushed so many living people into the sea of fire, did you ever hear them cry? Tens of thousands of lives were lost because of your insatiable greed. How innocent were they? Even if you only left behind 10% of the silver, they would be able to survive and would even be deeply grateful to you. Yet you insist on killing them all? As long as one had the slightest bit of conscience, they would not have done such a thing. His Highness still wants to be lenient, but in my opinion, the extermination of 10 families is not enough to infuriate the people." These words were said for them, but it was also said for the family members. Tens of thousands of lives were lost, and they still wanted to cry injustice? As family members, they knew very little about this kind of thing. Seeing their shocked and disbelieving eyes, they were too ashamed to face them. Covering their faces with both hands, they knelt on the ground and cried nonstop. It was as if they had lost their minds. Only vague words like "I was wrong" and "I'm sorry" were left in their mouths. Li Suyen was unmoved. "What are you waiting for? Take them away and lock them up. Wait for the punishment." Perhaps because they knew the reason, no one said anything. They just fell silent and lost their vitality. Perhaps there was a glimmer of hope at first, but now it had all turned into despair. Tens of thousands of lives. How could they allow them to live? Li Suyen knew that this was only temporary. When they could not stand the environment in the prison, they would explode. At that time, it did not matter if they were close relatives or not. They would resent and curse. They would not care that a large part of the money was actually used on them. At that time, these culprits would really have a taste of their own medicine. After dealing with it, he went back to report. Li Hongyuan nodded. Then he asked him and Yu Zhongqing to submit a letter to be sent to the capital as fast as possible. Then he also wrote his own opinion on the corruption case. He kept the things that Jingwan embezzled and made a list of the rest. He also wrote down how much the officials had embezzled. Finally, he asked for the emperor's judgment. Not to mention the other things, just the 2 additional things at the back would definitely cause Emperor Chung to have a myocardial infarction. After the myocardial infarction, he even praised him for doing well. Moreover, He would 100% accept Li Hongyuan's opinion on how to deal with it. This son was really good. He was so considerate. Not only did he save his face, he also recovered the loss of the national treasury. Although he always contradicted him in the past, he actually still cared about his father in his heart. It was just that he did not mean what he said. Although it was impossible to get a reply from Emperor Cheng within a day or two, Li Hongyuan could completely predict how he would react. His only reaction was, as for whether the letter submitted by Yu Zhongqing and Li Suyen would cause his blood pressure to soar, it was not within the scope of Li Hongyuan's consideration. But what was certain was that he would not die. That person cherished his life very much. He would not die because of these people. So many officials have been arrested. What about the government affairs of Shannon County and Quanzhou Prefecture? How will they deal with them? Jing Wan was a little worried. If there was no one at the top to take charge, there might be trouble below. Once the trouble was out there, it would directly affect the common people. When I was preparing to take action, I had already asked people to gather the accompanying officials in other places in Quanzhou Prefecture. They will arrive tomorrow at the latest. Don't worry, there won't be any problems. Those who have been imprisoned will not be able to come out alive. This matter is set in stone. When the capital receives the letter, they will select officials as soon as possible. Then they will be appointed as soon as possible. If they are transferred from the local area, it will take at most a month. If they are transferred from the capital, it will be even faster. Jing Wan nodded. Shannon County is a prosperous place. Just look at these officials, and you'll know how lucrative it is. Now that so many important positions have been vacated, I'm afraid the people in the capital will start arguing again. How can the selection of officials be quick? She expressed her doubts. The current minister of the Ministry of Personnel is your grandfather. Although the Ministry of Personnel doesn't have the authority to directly appoint rank 2 and 3 officials, Minister Luo's previous recommendations were all deeply appreciated by that person. Moreover, the mess in Jiangnan right now is definitely related to my brothers. Now that they're still guilty bodies, if they jump up and down at this time, that person will definitely be unhappy. They're not fools, but in the face of benefits, they won't give up so easily. Therefore, it's highly likely that they'll work on your grandfather. Jing Wan smiled. I have worried too much. Grandfather is upright and plain-spoken. He will not be slow. Upright and plain-spoken? Li Hongyuan rubbed his chin. That sly old fox. Although the Luo family wasn't very rich, they still had a certain amount of resources. At least, they didn't lack money, so he never cared about money. He was also a scholar official, but compared to other people, he was more humane. He had ambitions, and it was big enough, but it didn't make people dislike him. It was just that Jing Wan's experience in the previous life made him hold a grudge against the Luo family. Of course, some things weren't as serious as they used to be. Why is it not so? Jing Wan stared at him. Li Hongyuan touched her face. If you say so. He smiled sincerely. However, sincerity was proportional to perfunctory. The more sincere he was to her, the more perfunctory he was to her. Jing Wan could not be bothered to argue because she knew very well that her grandfather was not an upright and plain-spoken person. If she continued to argue, she would probably feel more guilty. So far, everything has come to an end. The rest is basically just the finishing touches. We can play along and fill up Wan's records. We can buy things along the way and fill up Wan's little treasury. Isn't it very easy? At this point, if the other prefectures and their manners still did not know what was good for them, then naturally, they could not blame him for not being polite. On this trip to Jiangnan, taking Wan to play was the main point. Everything else was just a side trip. Jing Wan was speechless. How could he talk like that? At this point, Jing Wan was relieved. Of course, for Li Hongyuan, it was not a big deal from the beginning to the end. They were relaxed, but other people were not relaxed. From the officials who had rolled home yesterday to the people of the city. Yesterday, the city was sealed off, and today, there was a beating early in the morning. However, With so many important officials going to prison at the same time, how could they deal with it calmly? Many wealthy merchants could no longer sit still and tried their best to find those officials who were temporarily safe and sound. Those who did not have the qualifications to stand in front of Li Hongyuan naturally did not know anything. As for the other personnel who were present at that time, whether they were transferred over after that or were also in Sichuan-Jofu at that time but were not involved, they could more or less guess. But they did not dare to speak carelessly. With Jin Wang, this great Buddha, being so ruthless and merciless, he did not care how many people he had offended. Therefore, if they did not want to be settled, it was best to obediently shrink back. Aside from the matters that they were supposed to do, they should not touch the slightest bit. Once they were done, they should quickly return home. What social activities, banquets, and so on, there was nothing to do. In the 2 days after the 100-boat crossing, the business of the various brothels and pleasure boats was very slow. Some people were burning with impatience, but naturally, there were also people who did not care and were idle. However, because of this chaos, the matter of Jin Qinhuang taking the little Gongzi out did not cause any waves. Should they rejoice or regret? In the evening, someone passed through Min County and went straight to Pei County, hurriedly entering Pei Clan's main residence. When Pei Clan had heard that Li Hongyuan was assassinated, the person who had always been well cultivated was furious and directly smashed the cup in his hand, causing the person who reported to him to bleed. Shameful. Why didn't you report such a big matter earlier? One must know that that grandson was originally difficult to deal with, and he also knew that the descendant of the previous dynasty's imperial family was in his hands. Even if it had nothing to do with the remnants of the previous dynasty, it could still be related, not to mention that he was related. Pei Clan had hated that he wanted to mince all these people and feed them to the dogs. The person who was smashed did not even dare to cover the wound with his hand, because the assassination failed. The people who participated were all wiped out. The next day, the entire city was sealed off. There was not enough time. Am I talking about this? Pei Clan head's voice was cold as ice. Such a big matter without reporting it to me. Did you eat a bear's heart and leopard's gall? Completely wiped out? That's not bad. It would be better if they all died. No matter what these people did in the past, no matter what contributions they made to him or Pei Clan, now that they had become obstacles, they would be mercilessly abandoned. It would be best if they all died. After calming down a little, Pei Clan head did not particularly care. After all, those people simply did not know who they were working for. The number of people who knew of his existence could be counted on one's fingers. Moreover, under normal circumstances, they would act in the name of his son. As for Li Hongyuan's safety, he was not the least bit concerned. Li Hongyuan was very important to him, but if he died like this, it could only mean that Li Hongyuan was incompetent. Thus, it was naturally not worth his energy and effort. Of course, if they met, it would definitely be a different face. Therefore, the reason why Pei Clan head was so angry, more than half of it was because those people acted on their own and challenged his authority. Immediately scram back to Chuanzhoufu and pay attention to the movements of Jin Qinhuang. Regarding the assassination, stop here. Let the people of Chuanzhoufu stay obediently. If anyone has any problems or acts on their own, don't blame Laofu for being ruthless. Yes, Clan head. After they left, Pei Clan head sank into deep thought. In reality, ever since he met his grandson, he felt that everything was not going well and not a single thing was satisfactory. It was not that he was controlling others to follow his plans, but it was as if he had sunk into a quagmire and was restrained in every way. It was not clear whether the obstacle was man-made or an accident. After contemplating, Pei Clan head felt that he should not continue to wait like this. He roughly understood the current situation in Jiangnan. After seeing Jin Qinhuang's style, there really was no one who dared to rashly pull the tiger's whiskers. The official matters were more or less done. There was nothing wrong with talking about private matters. Pei Clan head went to the rear residence to find his wife, Li Hongyuan's blood-related maternal grandmother. Pei Clan head was once passionate about making babies. When he did not have a D son or D daughter, he basically stayed in the main courtyard. As his first wife, she was very happy and her heart was completely planted in the hands of this man. Only after the D son was born, this situation changed, but it was not too much. At least half of a month, she would stay in the main courtyard. As the D wife of an aristocratic family, she should be satisfied with this situation. Therefore, even though it was sometimes miserable, most of the time it was pretty good. After all, even when the D son or daughter was born, her husband did not favor those concubines and always stood by her side, until the third child was born and her younger sister married in. Although the current Pei clan head's wife was the second wife, when she married in, she was not much different from her older sister. When she was in her maternal family, she heard her older sister say how good her brother-in-law was. It was not that she was not envious. Even after her older sister passed away, the family wanted her to continue the marriage alliance. She was even happy. After marrying, she really received the same treatment as her older sister. However, over time, she discovered that things were not like that. This man's so-called good was not because of love, but because of the offspring. Because D sons and D daughters were more honorable. So he let his wife have more children until she could no longer have children. How sad it was to get such a truth. However, her heart had already been given out. Could it be that, because that man only wanted her to have children, she could reject him at the door? It just so happened that she was pregnant again at that time. Just right, she took advantage of the pregnancy to think about it carefully. As for whether she could figure it out or not, God had already given her the answer. When she was giving birth to a child, she hurt her body and could not give birth. While she felt sad, she also felt a little fortunate. Women, even if they were daughter flowers, once they made a decision, they would have their own strength and wisdom. She would take good care of the child, be virtuous and magnanimous, and persuade her husband to share the reign with the dew so that the family could have more children. In this way, she would protect her position. Even if her husband did not stay in the main courtyard, he would not be able to shake her position. The Pei clan head was sanctimonious, but he was also a man of rules. Every month, unless something happened, he would stay in the main courtyard on the 1st and 15th day of the month. Chapter 337. The chief's wife sat in the same place and did not move for a long time, as if she was going to sit until the end of time and pass away. Little all of a sudden, tears rolled down her cheeks. No matter how hard she tried to wipe them away, they could not be wiped clean. The servants were frightened and hurriedly comforted her, but it was useless. One of the older nannies winked at the young maidservant. The young maidservant was also clever and quietly went out. The old madam liked the first young lady the most. With the first young lady around, she always smiled more. Pei Xiaoying also came quickly. Her footsteps were somewhat hurried, but she still did not mess up her bearing. Great-grandmother, what's the matter? Ah. When the chief's wife saw Pei Xiaoying, she suddenly reached out and grabbed her tightly. Pei Xiaoying, don't worry. Great-grandmother will risk my life to protect you. I will definitely protect you. She was weak all her life. When she lost her beloved daughter, she could only cry silently. She absolutely could not let her great-granddaughter fall into the miserable end of being a chess piece. Pei Xiaoying was confused. Great-grandmother, don't cry first. Tell me first what happened, okay? She softly pacified. The chief's wife gradually stopped crying, and her expression became more resolute. Pei Xiaoying, your great-grandfather asked me to go to Chuanzhou to see Jin Qinhuang and bring you along. His intention could not be clearer. Don't worry, great-grandmother will not allow this kind of thing to happen. Absolutely not. Great-grandmother will find you a good husband, great-grandmother. Pei Xiaoying's voice slightly raised as she interrupted her. Great-grandmother, I already knew about this matter. Great-grandfather told me long ago, and I agreed. So, you don't need to be like this. Although great-grandfather's temperament is good, he does not allow people to disobey him. You two love each other for a lifetime. Don't let Pei Xiaoying cause animosity between you two. The chief's wife felt as if she was splashed with a basin of ice water in the middle of winter. It was cold to the bone. It took a long time before she found her words. Did your great-grandfather say something to you or threaten you? Do you know what the relationship between Jin Qinhuang and our family is? Great-grandmother, what are you thinking? Great-grandfather has always doted on me. Why would he threaten me? I'm doing this willingly. The family gave birth to me and raised me. They gave me the best clothes and education. When the family needs me, I'll naturally do it. Great-grandmother should know a thing or two about the current situation of the Pei clan. As the saying goes, no egg can remain intact when the nest is overturned. If Ma Yingying alone could turn the situation around, that would naturally be the best. As for the relationship between Jin Qinhuang and our family, from a nominal point of view, Pei Ying should call him maternal uncle. A few days ago, I have seen Jin Qinhuang twice. He looks very similar to great-grandmother. Before meeting Li Hongyuan, Pei Ying was indifferent to this marriage. Perhaps it was purely for the benefit of the family and that ambition that was full of greed. But after meeting him, other than that, she also wanted to conquer that man. The chief's wife only felt a chill. The blood in her body was almost frozen. Looking at this great-granddaughter in front of her, who she doted on to the bone, it was the first time she felt so unfamiliar. No matter how righteous she was, she did not miss the ambition in her eyes. In the past, that bright and proud woman was also the one who resembled Pei Xiuying the most. In the end, she was actually this kind of person? Perhaps she was the one who resembled that man the most. Was it that she disguised herself too well, or was it that she was blind that she did not notice it? So in her eyes, her days like this were merely to obtain the so-called respect. Could it be considered to be a lifetime of love with that man? Unconsciously, she had already retracted her hand. She felt that she was very ridiculous. The person who needed her protection. She did not take action and only looked on helplessly. And when she summoned the courage to protect a person, the other party did not need it at all. Perhaps he even felt that she was meddling in other people's business. She was originally a person who never dared to disobey her husband. This time, the courage came with difficulty, but it was so easily scattered. Perhaps in the future, there would not be anyone who would make her give birth to such thoughts. She would play her role well in this inner courtyard, be a living bodhisattva without temper, stretching out her hand for clothes and opening her mouth for food, muddling along and waiting for death, who did not know how to do that. In any case, according to that man's desire for control, she did not need to worry about the inner courtyard. Since that is the case, then you should go back and pack up. At the latest, you should leave tomorrow. Pei Ying felt that there was something wrong with her, but she could not pinpoint the specifics. There was a bit of worry on her face. Great-grandmother, Pei Ying has failed to live up to your good intentions. No, great-grandmother just wants you to be well. Great-grandmother knows that you are a good child. No matter what happens in the future, you have to be well. Even if her heart was cold, after all, she had held her in the palm of her hands for so long. Even if she loved the house, how could there not be any bit of true feelings? Naturally, she would not curse her or hate her. That kind of love and friendship would end here. Pei Ying's face was slightly gloomy. It's Pei Ying's fault. In the end, she was not at the level of clan leader, Pei, who was cold-hearted and unscrupulous. All right, go back and pack up. Yes. Clan leader Pei's wife watched as Pei Ying's figure disappeared at the door. I hope you don't regret it for the rest of your life. Not long after Pei Xiuying left, the twin sisters came. They probably bumped into each other outside. In the past, she might have thought that the two sisters would not use their status as elders to cause trouble for Pei Ying. Now that she thought about it, she was too worried. As the legitimate eldest daughter of the fourth generation, the 3 generations above her doted on her and even had the protection of the head of the family. How could she be at a disadvantage? Even if someone was jealous of her, it would at most be a small fuss. They would definitely not go overboard. Now that she thought about it, in the past, whenever she was in trouble, she would never complain. However, there would always be people who intentionally or unintentionally revealed it to her. Naturally, she would be angry. And every time, Paying would always smile and comfort her, saying that she did not feel wronged. In terms of seniority, they were her aunts. In terms of age, they were younger than her. Moreover, they were just joking and did not have to take it seriously. With such magnanimity and courtesy, this great-grandmother would naturally feel even more distressed. Of course, she would help her vent her anger. Originally, it was only 30%, but she insisted on giving her an 80% punishment. After Pei-ing pleaded for leniency, the punishment became 12%. In this way, this old thing, would take revenge for her. She, Pei-ing, did not have to do anything and even gained a good reputation. Everyone in the house praised her for being filial, magnanimous, and good-tempered. In reality, they just grasped this old thing's temperament and made use of her again and again. They also had a good sense of propriety. The person involved could not see clearly. Suddenly jumping out of the memory, it was not a normal kind of panic. It was simply chilling. Clan leader Pei's wife panted as if she was about to suffocate. She was very uncomfortable. Seeing that something was wrong, the servant hurried forward to help her breathe. The sisters, who had been hesitating when they came in, were also frightened and hurried forward. Grandmother, hurry up and get the doctor. Although their grandmother didn't like them very much, she still knew the basic filial piety. Clan leader Pei's wife reached out and grabbed their hands. It's okay. There's no need to call the doctor. She gradually calmed down. Why are you two little girls here? The sisters were flattered by such a pleasant expression. The younger sister said hesitantly, we just heard that grandmother seems to. The elder sister quickly pinched her secretly. They had been watching that slut Pei-ing all the time and naturally knew that their grandmother did not seem to be doing well. How could they say such things? My sister and I just came to see grandmother. It's just that your granddaughter saw that grandmother seems to be. We just saw Pei-ing leave. You have always doted on her the most. Why didn't she spend more time with you? Clan leader Pei's wife was old, but her eyesight was actually quite good. She saw the sisters' actions and their little tricks in front of her. If it was in the past, she might have been angry and sent them away indifferently. But now she felt that some things were really quite funny. Speaking of which, these two children were her direct descendants. Pei-ing was only her elder sister's descendant. It was just that the two sisters had a good relationship and had never blushed since they were young, let alone have any dirty thoughts. Therefore, from the beginning, she treated her elder sister's children as her own. She had always treated them equally. After so many years, even among the Pei family, many people thought that she had given birth to all the children of the first wife. Because no one felt that it was wrong, naturally, she would not deliberately explain. She felt a little guilty towards these two children, but that was all. At most, she would not do anything biased towards Ma-ing in the future. She was already a person who had more than half of her life buried in the ground. She would not immediately withdraw her feelings and transfer it to these two children just because Ma-ing had hurt her heart. I'm going out for a trip. Let Pei-ing come with me. Let her go back and pack her things. The two sisters looked at each other. Their grandmother had not left Pei County for more than 10 years. She did not even appear when the ancestors of her in-laws celebrated their birthdays. She was suddenly going out this time, so it was definitely not a small matter. If she did not bring Pei-ing along, they would not have any thoughts. But since Pei-ing was going, they would do everything they could to follow her. Grandmother, bring us along too. Yes. Grandmother, please take us with you. We promise that we will listen to grandmother obediently and will not provoke Ma-ing. Clan leader Pei's wife was a little stunned. You want to go too? Do you know what you are going to do? No matter what we're going to do, grandmother won't sell us. Grandmother, bring us along, okay? Won't sell you? Haha, what's the difference between this trip and selling people? However, according to the head of the family, if they still had to pick a few people, they would definitely have to choose from the grandchildren. The youngest generation, other than Pei-ing, was too young and naturally could not be brought along. Logically speaking, if they really wanted to form a marriage alliance, these two children's identities were the most suitable. Go and call your parents over. I will explain the matter to them. If they agree to let you go, I will bring you along. She was only their grandmother, not their parents. Moreover, she could not bring herself to send her granddaughters to someone else's door as a concubine, even if that person was her grandson. Therefore, it was better to explain it to their parents and ask for their opinion. As for whether they wanted to tell these two children, it was up to them. As for the other candidates, there were many, not to mention the legitimate children of concubines. There were even one or two of her concubine daughters who were of marriageable age. Of course, in terms of seniority, the last candidate was her grandson's aunt. She could not do such a crazy thing. As for the rest, there was nothing to worry about. She did not care about what kind of mood or thoughts one had. She only cared about choosing the beautiful one. Of course, because there was a possibility that she would become her grandson's concubine, she had to consider her temperament. The two sisters looked at each other. It was indeed not a small matter. Thinking about it, they actually felt a little excited. Their father was at home during this period of time. Therefore, they were quickly invited over. The man was already over 50 years old. He was the first child of Pei Clan Head's wife. His current wife was the third. The age difference between the two was close to 20 years. The woman looked like a young married woman, but the man, forget it, there was no need to talk about it. Pei Clan Head's wife deliberated for a moment and still only invited her son because she was not sure if this daughter-in-law knew about Wanwan. As the legitimate son of Pei Clan Head, he was not a good-for-nothing. He knew most of the things about Pei Clan. And because of Pei Clan Head's teachings, their natural disposition was at least 30% similar to Pei Clan Head's. When he first planned to form a marriage alliance with Jin Qinhuang, he first thought of his own twin daughters. However, Pei Clan Head pulled Pei Yuing out. He did not dare to disobey his father. Even if he had complaints in his heart, he did not dare to say anything. Now that there was a chance, he naturally had no reason to disagree. Seeing this son's face full of joy and his promise, Pei Clan Head's wife only had 4 words in her heart, as expected. Then you go and talk to your wife and 2 children. It's best to ask their opinions. Being a concubine is not a glorious thing, after all, not to mention it's the imperial family. Mother, you worry too much. At present, it is natural to hide it. In the future, when that nephew ascends a throne, even if the girl from our Pei clan is not the empress, she will at least be one of the 4 imperial concubines. She may even be like little sister in the past, and be conferred the title of Imperial Gui Fei. How honorable is that? How could it be a disgraceful thing? These words were taken for granted, just like his father. Pei Clan Head's wife forced a smile. These sons, including the one born by her sister, all respected her. Perhaps they were filial enough, but they would not tell her about big or small matters. They would not ask for her opinion, let alone listen to her. They clearly knew that she was most concerned about the matter of his little sister, but they said it out loud and pierced her heart. Was this really filial? No matter how cold their heart was, it was just like this. Set out tomorrow. Yes, this son will retire. There was nothing wrong with the etiquette. But what was the use of this superficial skill? After leaving, he returned to his own courtyard. Whether it was his wife or his 2 daughters, he did not mention the specifics. He only told them that the person they wanted to meet was Jin Qinhuang. What they had to do was to win his affection and stay by his side. At the same time, it was best to get rid of Pei Yuing. The current Pei clan had looked robust, but he could not deny the fact that he was old and could die at any time. Now was also the time when the brothers were fighting for power. Jin Qinhuang's side was a very crucial chess piece. If his daughter won, the chips in his hands would immediately multiply. Even if the position of the clan head was not his in the end, he would have the ability to compete with the eldest branch. You alone may not be able to compare to Pei Yuing. Your advantage is that you have 2 people and 1 face. Jin Qinhuang has seen countless beauties, but he may not have seen twin beauties. Men usually have a strong sense of novelty. As a father, he used himself as the standard to teach his daughter how to attract the attention of other men. As the mother of the two sisters, the more she heard, the darker her face became. What kind of person did he think his daughter was? Rushing to the door to curry favor, and even had two daughters together. Was Pei clan an aristocratic family or a brothel? Husband Lord. The man turned his head, his eyes rather cold. Prepare clothes and jewelry for the two of them. With Pei clan head setting an example. The daughters-in-law of Pei clan's main residence had no right to speak. The more unyielding they were, the earlier they would die. At this moment, the two sisters' faces were a bit green and white. They thought that they were gold and jade, but now they had to do this kind of thing. If outsiders knew, how would they have the face to meet people? Perhaps he knew what they were thinking. The man's face became more gloomy. Pei Yuing stayed. And if you can't stay, then find a place to end it. There's no need to come back. You have many brothers and sisters. It doesn't matter if you two are more or less. Useless waste. Naturally, there's no need to waste money and food. The two sisters looked at him in disbelief. Was this really the gentle and elegant father that they had in mind? However, from his expression, they could only see seriousness. In a flash, their faces were as white as paper. They had always been proud of being Pei clan's daughters, but in the end, in the eyes of their own biological father, they were like dispensable objects. This kind of blow was 10 times, 100 times more painful than Pei Yuing deliberately scheming against them, but in the end, they were severely punished. Haven't you always wanted to suppress Pei Yuing? This is the best opportunity. When Prince Jin ascends the throne, you will become the most honorable women of Pei clan. When the clan head sees you, he will have to kneel down. At that time, even if you are angry with me because of today's matter, you can take revenge. After giving a big stick, naturally, he also had to give a sweet jujube. All right, I still have things to do. You two prepare well. When he left, his bearing was enough like his father. Mother. The two sisters were in tears. The woman also couldn't stop wiping her tears. Mother has no choice, you. No matter how much they cried, they couldn't change the final result. If they did as they were told, there might be a way out. The next day, the twin sisters, Pei Yuing, and 3 other beautiful girls were directly chosen by Pei clan head's wife. They knew nothing about the matter. 6 beautiful girls. After today, perhaps they would walk towards a completely different fate. When the twins looked at Pei Xiuying, they were no longer so straightforward with jealousy and hatred. There was even some pity in their eyes. So what if she was the most outstanding girl in the Pei family? The few of them standing together were all the same. No one was more noble than the other. Pei Yuing looked very indifferent, no different from before, but her heart was not calm. It was not because there were more opponents, she simply didn't put them in her eyes, but because she was placed together with them, it was simply the greatest humiliation to her. However, this was the matter decided by her great-grandfather. She had no right to criticize. As the most considerate and most educated girl, even if it was not her great-grandfather's decision, she should not say anything. She only needed to show her most outstanding side at all times. At the end of the day, this was not something to be proud of, so naturally, they couldn't make a big fuss about it. Even the members of the Pei clan didn't know that Pei Yuing was going out. When they passed by Min County, although the two clans had not completely fallen out with each other, they were unusually nervous. Previously, Pei Yuing had sent a valuable gift back to her maternal family, but they had not returned yet. Min County did not let them return, and Pei clan had also did not allow them to come and pick them up. Obviously, both clans were betting on the other side to bow down first. Pei Yuying's wife pulled open the curtain of the carriage and looked in the direction of Min County's old residence. She sighed deeply, gave an order, and continued on the road. As the convoy was sufficiently low-key, it naturally did not attract too much attention. However, before Min Yuhan left, she reminded her brother, the Min family head, that in the near future, the Pei family would definitely make a move. Anyone who came from Pei County had to pay attention, especially those carriages with the Pei family's insignia. No matter how inconspicuous they were, they had to inform him beforehand, especially those heading to Chuanzhou Constabulary. As such, Pei Yuying's wife and her entourage fell into the eyes of Min County's Min County. Pei Yuying's wife could not wait to see Li Hongyuan, but when she thought of her own motive, she seemed to have no words to face him. Therefore, with a conflicted heart, she did not hurry and did not deliberately slow down the speed of her journey. Pei Yuying had a residence in Chuanzhou Prefecture, and the people who lived in the main residence were the people who lived there. Out of the 6 ladies, 5 of them had to call him cousin. Min Yuhan was the first to receive the news. Not long after this group of people arrived, he asked someone to inquire a little and guessed the identity of the main personnel. His eyes were cold. That old thing would not change his mind so easily. However, now he really wanted to see what kind of expression that old thing would have when he thought that he would definitely succeed. But in the end, it was all for naught. Recently, Min Yuhan's side had not been peaceful. Perhaps it was because of his proposal to Pei Xiuying, but that grandnephew of his, who admired Pei Xiuying, was really smitten by the beauty. He did not care about anything else, and did not care about each other's identities. Min Yuhan naturally did not argue with him. As the younger sister, Miss Yuan was naturally worried about her brother and had a good relationship with Pei Xiuying. However, it did not mean that this lady was completely emotional. She was usually very open-minded, but it did not mean that she was careless. On the contrary, she was actually very sharp in certain matters. For example, she had noticed that something was wrong in this matter. She did not have much contact with Uncle Yuan, but she could be sure that he was definitely not someone who did not consider the consequences of his actions. Therefore, she did not quarrel and did not make a fuss. She even persuaded her brother and prepared to talk to Uncle Yuan. Perhaps it was because of Pei Xiuying, but Min Yuan actually liked Yuan now. Perhaps she was not outstanding, or perhaps she was not a peerless beauty, but her mind was simple, pure, and beautiful. After interacting with her, he felt that external matters were not as dirty as he expected. This was because when Yuan came to find him, he did not say much and only told her, "Believe me, Uncle Yuan, Pei Xiuying is not a good friend. Stay away from her. https://www.bicken.com/11/11807/6653895. HTML. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bicken.com. Com mobile version reading website, mbicken.com. Chapter 338. No matter how arrogant the Pei family was, and no matter how much the Pei family head's wife wanted to see her grandson, she still had to follow the rules and send him a greeting card. Speaking of which, she didn't even have the honor of being Min Yuhan, much less a grandmother. Min Yuhan had personally brought the greeting card to Li Hongyuan. As long as Li Hongyuan saw the card, he would meet her. Could the Pei family head's wife do it? No, she wasn't even the one who signed the card. As for when they could meet, it would depend on Li Hongyuan's mood. In the current situation, there weren't many people who dared to send a greeting card to Li Hongyuan. Hence, the card would reach Li Hongyuan very quickly. Li Hongyuan took the card and signed it with a Pei family head's personal seal. With just a glance, he threw the card out. It was clearly a group of women. Logically speaking, they should be sending the card to the princess consort. At this time, they were actually playing tricks and bypassing the princess consort to meet him directly. What kind of logic was this? To put it in a small way, it was to avoid Jin Qinhuang Fei and achieve their unspeakable goal. After all, things like concubines should be handled by the main wife, but since her own man had agreed, how could she not agree? Hence, as long as Li Hongyuan agreed to let the Pei family's daughter stay, Luo Jingwan's surprise would be in vain. To put it simply, they were looking down on the princess consort and the royal family. It would be fine if they achieved their goal. However, if they didn't and Jingwan insisted on pursuing the matter, the entire Pei family would have to bear the consequences. No one in the Pei family was an official or a noble. They were just ordinary people. It would only add to their crimes. Jingwan naturally saw the post as well. Actually, I've always felt that Patriarch Pei is a very strange person. Logically speaking, he should be able to see the Pei family's current situation clearly. However, he acts as if the Pei family is still the #1 aristocratic family in name. He is confident. No, it should be arrogant. No matter how I look at it, he doesn't seem like a fool. Then what is he relying on? Just like this time. Is he so sure that you will accept the Pei family's daughter? Is he so sure that I will swallow this humiliation? We'll soon find out whether or not he has any chips that will guarantee his victory. However, it's also possible that he's considering others from his own standpoint. As long as there are enough benefits, women are just objects. He probably thinks that it's an unbelievable thing to reject an object because he doesn't want it. A person who can do such a thing must be the stupidest person in the world. Li Honyuan looked at Jingwan with a faint smile and a hint of mockery. Your Highness, are you saying that you are stupid? Is this self-awareness? However, according to this man's style, he wouldn't want unnecessary items, but he would hold onto the benefits behind them. It was a typical bandit's logic and also a bandit style. However, he was her man. Even if her worldview was shattered into pieces, she still felt that there was nothing wrong with him. This has nothing to do with being stupid or not. The main thing is that I have a fierce wife at home, so I fear her like a tiger. If his wife was too powerful, no matter how many benefits he had, he could only stand aside. Jingwan raised her eyebrows. Since she was the one who got the benefits, then it didn't matter if she had a bad reputation. So be it. Since your Highness has said so, I should do something to live up to my reputation. Since the concubines sent themselves to my door, I'll have to work hard to help you deal with them. This kind of thing should be dealt with as a wife. Could it be that Wan originally intended to stand aside and do nothing? His wife didn't have enough awareness. He needed to teach her more. My husband, you're thinking too much. I didn't intend to let you see them at all. Jingwan smiled mysteriously. Any signs that could cause the lunatic to act up had to be extinguished. That's the best. Jingwan was fully in charge of this matter. Naturally, she was prepared to leave them out for a few days. Of course, she wouldn't immediately tell them when to come. Only the unknown could make people anxious. They coveted her husband and tried to destroy her family's happiness. How could she be merciful to these people just because they were related to Li Honyuan? Jingwan said that she wouldn't be merciful, but she was just leaving them out. This was nothing. Li Honyuan sighed in his heart. With Wan's personality, as long as outsiders didn't do anything substantial to her, she would probably never be ruthless. If it were someone else, knowing this situation, they would have done something long ago. For example, ruining a person's reputation was the simplest method. Especially since Madame Pei didn't want people to know what they were doing. They should have done everything they could. Wan probably didn't even think about this. Li Honyuan looked at the lazy Jingwan nestled in his arms and reached out to touch her hair. Forget it, it wasn't like he couldn't protect her. There was no need to force her on such a small matter. A change in temperament was often accompanied by a big change. Li Honyuan didn't want Jingwan to experience that kind of thing. Once was enough, although it only existed in his memory, and Wan didn't know about it. If something similar happened again, he would definitely go crazy and drag the whole world down with him. It was fine as long as his sweetheart was happy. Jingwan and Li Honyuan were naturally having a good time. However, the Pei clan leader's wife and the 6 Pei clan ladies were not so calm. Including the other 3 ladies, they already knew the purpose of their visit to Chuanzhou Mansion. It was a matter of life and marriage, so it was hard for anyone to remain indifferent. Pei Xiuying seemed to be the most indifferent, as if this matter had nothing to do with her. However, the twin sisters, who knew her very well, snorted in disdain. If she really didn't care, she wouldn't have played the zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting so frequently. After 2 days of settling down, the two of them didn't feel like the world was falling apart. On the contrary, they were determined to succeed. The other 3 also had some determination. 2 of them were concubines, and one of them was the first wife. The father of the first wife was also a concubine, and also had no status in the main residence of the Pei family. Even if they could marry the first wife in the future, even if the man was from an aristocratic family, he would definitely have no power or status in the family. Instead of marrying such a person and living a simple life, it was better to take a gamble. Who knew they might even be able to rise to the top in a single step and be incomparably glorious. That's right, not every aristocratic family looked down on the nouveau riche, or even the imperial family. Their words might agree, but their thoughts were completely different. Needless to say, the wife of the head of the Pei family, the one she was really anxious about, was her grandson. It was reasonable to say that he should already know about her relationship with the Pei family. However, the invitation sent by the Pei family had not been replied to for a long time. Was he resentful in his heart? Did he simply not want to see the people of the Pei family? Then, unexpectedly, she thought of the expression of her daughter when she left the family. The more she thought about it, the more she blamed herself. The more she blamed herself, the more painful it was. So much so that she almost fell ill. However, because she didn't see Li Hongyuan, she held on with one breath. Of course, they were not the only ones who were anxious. There were also the accompanying officials. When they were in Kamingfu, they were scattered and sent to various places in Jiangnan. At that time, they felt that this was exactly what they wanted and hurriedly rushed over to help clean up and erase the evidence. However, Jin Qinhuang didn't play his cards according to common sense. This kind of action was useless, and might even leave behind something that could be used against them. Moreover, after they were recalled, Jin Qinhuang's meaningful gaze always made them feel uneasy. Now that they were temporarily in charge of the government affairs of Shannon County, each and every one of them stretched their skin and didn't dare to make any small movements. They were afraid that the next moment the blackguard would appear in front of them. This time, there was no more suitable imperial envoy candidate than Jin Qinhuang. It was really true, from top to bottom, which one of them wasn't cleaned up until they were docile. Because the ordinary people were also affected, Jingwan proposed to go out for a stroll. It wasn't to say that it was with great fanfare, but it was also absolutely not low-key. The main thing was to tell the people that the sky didn't fall and the earth didn't sink. Even if something happened, it was still the officials. It had nothing to do with the ordinary people. They should do what they should do. Li Hongyuan didn't have the mind to care about how these people were doing. After a long time, even if it didn't work out, when they returned to the capital, they would naturally recover. However, he was very interested in simply accompanying his wife to play. These days, the chief historian of the Great Map was not idle. In this city, there was no problem even if he wasn't needed as a guide. Because he had a special purpose, he naturally didn't go to a more special place. Probably wherever it was bustling, he would go there. Although Jingwan and the others' attire was relatively restrained, but Yu Zhongqing, Li Suyen, and the others' attire wasn't restrained at all. They directly wore their official robes, and their swords never left their hands. That deterrent force was not a little bit. At first, everyone who saw them hurriedly retreated, fearing that they would bump into them. The class was so distinct. Jingwan secretly sighed in her heart and threw this little emotion aside. She pulled Li Hongyuan to stroll around in high spirits. From the end of this street to the end of that street, it seemed that she had never seen these things before. Looking here, looking there, looking there. Even the stall owners of the small stalls were amiable. Jingwan was actually more approachable. With a bit of deliberate effort, the originally nervous people also gradually relaxed. How much is this? Jingwan had a small doll in her hand. No need, no need. It's this commoner's honor that the princess consort likes this little thing. How can I take the princess consort's money? The stall owner's wife quickly said. Jingwan joked, we don't lack this little bit of money. If we meet someone who looks rich, boss should try his best to rip them off. Even if it's 10 times or 100 times, you wouldn't feel that it's expensive. If you don't take the money, they might think that you're looking down on them. Jingwan was very conscious of being a sucker. The stall owner was a little fearful. Princess consort. This commoner's wife doesn't have any intention of looking down on you. This commoner, the stall owner's wife, also had a face of anxiety, wanting to explain. Jingwan waved her hand. Don't be nervous, don't be nervous. I know that you don't have that intention. I also don't have that idea. I'm just saying that there might be such people. Since you've met them, you should earn more. The stall owner and his wife were speechless. After stuttering for a while, they finally said, that's bullying. Jingwan smiled. This husband and wife were honest people. When they met that kind of shrewd person, they wouldn't hesitate to rip them off. Jingwan chose a few more dolls and stuffed 2 dolls into Li Hongyuan's hands. Li Hongyuan didn't refuse. He picked it up with 2 fingers and looked at it. He really couldn't see what was good about this toy. The workmanship was rough and the material was inferior. If his wife really liked it, she could just let the servants make it. It was guaranteed that it would be 100 times better than this. Seeing Li Hongyuan's obvious disdain, Jingwan glared at him. Li Hongyuan paused the words at the tip of his tongue. As long as princess consort likes it. Jingwan then smiled again and gave him a, at least you know your place look. Muan, pay up. She turned to the next place. Li Hongyuan shook his head with a little indulgence and followed her. Mu, and handed over 1 tael of silver with a chuckle. Is it enough? It's too much. 20 copper coins is enough. So, the husband and wife were really honest people. Keep it. There's no need to change. A group of corrupt officials have been cleaned up. Both His Highness and Princess Consort are in a good mood. We all feel happy. Eunuch Mu's words were simple and straightforward, but had a deeper meaning. Of course, they would do their best to help the princess consort achieve her wish. In this way, after a few more times, some things would gradually spread. Turning back, Jingwan looked at Muan. And he was really a good lackey. Well done. Mama, remember to give our eunuch Mu a big red title when you go back. Yes, this servant will remember. Granny Gong replied, looking as proper as usual. Thank you, Princess Consort, for the reward. Eunuch Mu received it flatteringly. Compared to Mama Gong, he was simply shameless. Several servant girls couldn't help covering their mouths and laughing. And the others all secretly scolded him in their hearts for being a treacherous villain who only knew how to please the princess consort. Well, although they criticized him in their hearts, in essence, they absolutely had no objection. When Li Hongyuan and others went out like this, those who wanted to see them or meet them by chance would naturally come out one after another. However, Li Hongyuan was not in the mood to pay attention to them. As soon as he saw someone deliberately approaching, the black-clothed guards, who were the guards, immediately stepped forward and blocked the person. They pulled out their swords by an inch. The meaning could not be more obvious. Immediately retreat, otherwise they would not be polite. After 2 or 3 times, naturally, no one would be tactless enough to come forward. At this moment, Jingwan pulled Li Hongyuan to stand in front of the dough figurine stall and asked people to make 2 dough figurines according to them. Such a boring thing. Li Hongyuan patiently accompanied her. From time to time, he tilted his head, slightly lowered his head, and whispered a few words in her ear. The smile on Jingwan's face was unusually bright and beautiful. The joy overflowed from inside and infected the people around her. His Highness and Princess Consort have a good relationship. The old man who made the dough figurines couldn't help sighing with emotion. Li Hongyuan chuckled and Jingwan slightly blushed. That scene, how many people's eyes were mesmerized. However, the atmosphere between the two was harmonious, and no one could get in between. In the tea house next to them, the Pei clan head's wife and several Pei clan girls had a panoramic view of all this. The Pei clan head's wife couldn't help but use her handkerchief to wipe the corners of her eyes and kept saying, "So similar, so similar." The focus of Pei Xiuying and her was naturally different. The relationship between the husband and wife was too good. As a result, it would be more difficult for her to do things in the future. Therefore, she subconsciously clenched her fists. Only when she felt a sharp pain in her palm did she slowly release it. Secretly, she told herself that it didn't matter. No matter how good the relationship was, it couldn't withstand misunderstandings and couldn't help but drive a wedge between them. Slowly planning, step by step, she would always be able to achieve her goal. As for the other girls, they couldn't help but blush. It was obvious that they were young girls yearning for love. They probably didn't think that Jin Qinhuang would grow up to be so handsome. It should be known that aristocratic families were often a concentration camp of handsome men and beautiful women. Especially in the current Pei clan, just casually pick one out, and there wasn't one who wasn't good-looking. It could be imagined how picky these girls' eyes were. They all unanimously believed that they had never seen a man more handsome than Jin Qinhuang. It was this face that made her originally 70% tempted. Now, she was 12% tempted. Pei Xiuying glanced at them. They were really toads wanting to eat swan meat. She didn't put them in her eyes at all. Her gaze landed on the Pei clan head's wife. "Great-grandmother, you should relax. No matter what, you should be happy to see me." "Pei Xiuying, you're right. I've finally seen you. I've finally seen you." Almost 30 years, her daughter almost 30 years The others returned to their senses. They were confused. They felt that something wasn't right, as if there was something they didn't know. Jingwan held the kneaded dough. Hers was more similar. Sure enough, it was because a certain person's appearance was too good and her temperament was too outstanding that she couldn't knead it. The workmanship is not bad. Wang Fei Nyang overpraises. This commoner is really ashamed. I can't knead even a fraction of Wang Ye and Wang Fei Nyang's charm. It's already not bad. Has the old master already studied? Jingwan asked with a smile. When I was young, I studied for a few years. It's just that I'm relatively stupid and couldn't even pass the exam. Studying doesn't necessarily require one to pass the exam. If everyone is literate, I believe that after graduation, it would be a different scene. Jingwan's voice slowed down a bit. Not only the master of the kneading dough, even Li Honyuan was startled. It was reasonable to say that he would do everything to help Jingwan achieve her wishes. However, he had to admit that he couldn't make everyone literate. It was impossible even if he devoted his whole life. This wasn't because of his personal reasons, but because the environment didn't allow it. "I'm sorry." Jingwan was surprised. She looked up at him and immediately reacted. "What's there to be sorry about? I know that this isn't something that can be done with one's own strength. As long as we work hard bit by bit, one day in the future, we might be able to achieve it." Even in her previous life, wasn't there also someone who didn't study? "Yes. Let's go. Mu and Pei." Mu Gonggong wanted to say, "Wang Fei, you don't have to say this every time. This servant will consciously pay. If you say it every time like this, it makes this servant feel very useless." Even lunch was eaten outside. The whole day passed by just like that. Although she didn't do anything meaningful, Jingwan felt very happy. Jingwan, who was in a good mood, finally mercifully replied to Peisher, letting them visit the next morning. After receiving the reply, Peisher's old and young finally breathed a sigh of relief. The next day, after a good preparation, they went to the other courtyard. When they were let in, they each had their own thoughts about seeing Jin Qinhuang. However, when they saw Jingwan holding a pair of scissors trimming the flowers, they couldn't help but stare blankly. What was going on? It was reasonable to say that the invitation to the male and female masters would be separated and sent to their hands separately. They had nothing to do with each other. In order to avoid Jin Qinhuang Fei, they specially used Pei clan head's invitation. https://www.bicon.com/11/11807/6653900 HTML chapter error. Click here to report. No registration required. We will deal with it as soon as possible. After reporting, please wait patiently and refresh the page. Please remember the domain name of this book, www.bikin.com. Biku, the mobile reading website. Bikin.com. You're tuning in to the Echo Reads YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.